part of me was like, oh, I'm not really cut out for journalism. There's all this other stuff I didn't want to learn. I'll get into education because that's going to stay the same forever. And then year one.
If there's anything that I've figured, it's that none of this stuff stays the same forever.
Nope. But I mean,
the food industry doesn't. It's like
nothing.
The film industry. People were talking about how the film industry was going to change in like 10 years. There was this big New York Times thing of like talking to the industry professionals and the challenges, and even like the Russo brothers were being asked about stuff, about what's going to change, and they're like, it's going to be so hard to get independent movies seen by people, and it was like, yeah, sooner than you thought, huh? It was like April of last year, like these questions were being asked, and now it's like so much of it is obsolete. Hello, Dylan. Dylan is gonna be my mod in case we get any kind of trolling action going on.
For sure.
So I'm just going to check my audio levels on my tablet. Dylan, how do things look?
Hi, Dylan.
You got it. Alright, so I sound much quieter compared to you.
Oh, that's an issue.
Dylan says hi. Alright, give me a test 1 2 3.
Test 1 2 3.
Okay. And
do you need me to turn down the gain or anything?
No, I think we're good. I just kind of had my tablet sound low. Dylan, what do you think? Nice start screen. Thank you. As it turns out, using default tools to podcast and stream is way easier now than it was 2 years ago.
Progress.
Turns out.
Upgrades, people. Upgrades.
That's the other thing is like getting into. I just wanted to do this because we've both been wanting to have conversations about this because Dylan's the only person I've talked to about this game, and I know you played it on your own, and Yasmin is currently playing it.
She's currently playing it. She just got to day 2 of Ellie, so I've like sequestered her in the bedroom. I'm like, we are going to be heavy spoiler talk.
Yeah, God, that must be really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of like in-text conversations with people, but like, yeah, I haven't had just a conversation about it, so I'm excited for that.
So, hang on 1 second here. Oh, Dylan, thank you for sharing that because I realized that I need to fix this. Uh-oh. Yeah, I think we're good. How we looking? Did I spell everything right? Yeah.
As far as I can see, yes.
Alright. Okay. Alright. And I'm just gonna open this so that I'm looking at you in real time. Okay, good. If I move the window, that's okay too. So yeah. My name's Evan Griffin, and I'm here with my friend Alex Suffolk.
Hey.
I currently sometimes write for theyoungfolks.com, but mainly act there as an editor. And Alex is a former peer and current teacher and some kind of doctorate.
I have a master's. Thank you.
A master's degree.
I get paid. I did get a master's degree. I can add MED next to my name, and sometimes I do just for.
That's almost a doctor.
The satisfaction. Almost. It's it's like silver medal as far as degrees are concerned.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, more like bronze and a half, I guess, because it's specifically MED.
Then
Like,
that would make mine aluminum, an aluminum
oh,
metal. In English and journalism. So we decided to kind of like get together and try a little recording because we used to do recording podcasts and Dungeons and Dragons shows, and it's been like a
wahoo.
couple years, and we've been wanting to talk about The Last of Us Part 2. And since he's in LA and I'm on the East Coast, we would be doing it social distance style anyway.
Massive distance style.
Huge distance, like several yards.
Several. Yeah, that's a word.
So, so what we're gonna kind of do is we're gonna break down different aspects of the game. That is a very divisive game, but we're really just talking about it because we both have things that we love about it and the first game, being The Last of Us Part 2. I don't know if I said that specifically. So this is the reboot of the old podcast we used to do that had a terrible name, and I haven't decided a new one. So
Yeah,
right
did
now
you
I'm
decide on a
calling
new
it-
one yet?
Just calling it D-Pad Rebooted for right now.
D-pad reboot. D-pad part
either
2.
That, either that, or I'll just come up with something completely different. But the logo just happened to end up being a D-Pad / PlayStation Plus ripoff. So,
Well, don't let Sony know about it, as it is.
well,
They're gonna.
no, it's not. It does nothing belongs to them. That is a vector rendering of my personal Super Nintendo D-pad. So
All right, okay.
no laws going on here. The only thing I could possibly get hit with is Konami, because Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater music is playing at this exact moment.
Oh well, okay. That's a crossing of the streams, my friend.
Well, you know.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that's worth talking about because I feel if we're just gonna dive into it, I feel like the interesting thing about The Last of Us Part 2 is that I'm always comparing it to other games because it is this weird crossroads where it tries to do a lot of different things. It takes a lot of swings, which I respect.
I would rather that you compare it to many other games than a film.
That's
Unlike
true.
somebody out there who decided to compare this game to Schindler's List.
I mean, it's a tone deaf comparison.
There are so many better comparisons that you can make, and that is not one of them. Like, okay, like just to start off, like tone setting. We're gonna get to story, but tone setting. This is much more of like, I'm trying to think, because it's a zombie apocalypse thing. It's just one with a really good story.
The closest, I mean, I think the most like direct comparison is The Walking Dead, right? In terms of it being, it's sci-fi, it's post-apocalypse, but it's trying to be like serious and more about the human emotion and how humans like deal with putting the pieces back together after the fact, and the zombies are just kind of there.
Yeah, I actually, our friend Tyler Carlson, who is also a writer on The Young Folks, and the purest diehard Walking Dead fan I've ever known, never played the first game, and then 2 weeks before 2 came out, I told him, you have the remaster, play it. I guarantee you it is so much your shit that you will blow through it in 3 nights, and that's exactly what he did. So I agree. I think that it does the Walking Dead tone better than the entirety of the Walking Dead, which is something that can be merited. So what we're going to kind of do is go through different aspects of the game and analyze it as a game with story components intertwined, and we're going to kind of go through these points discussing how they work thematically and also mechanically, because I've been trying to think about different ways that we can talk about video games, and I think that there's too much of this historic breaking down, like deconstructing the recipe, as it were.
Yeah, it's sort of like a compartmentalization.
Yeah, and IGN used to do that, and I get it. It's when you first start doing like reviews for a video game and your experiences in like film. I remember the first game review I ever did was Tales from the Borderlands, which is entirely story based, and I had to break it down like that to even make sense. So we're gonna kind of try to analyze those different things so that way we can kind of see how something as simple as the UI and animation kind of integrates into the performance. Because I think all of these things gel very, very carefully together, and I think that a lot of people worked really hard on this game, and every microcosm is deeply considered at the production level. Do you want to start
For sure.
with the the first thing on the list being like the backpack thing because you had mentioned that you hadn't thought about it?
I know. I think you were just sort of listening. I don't know if that was like we need to talk about the backpack first, which is
No,
which is what
it
I
was
took
just
from
kind of
it
the
being
first one
top
I
of the
thought of,
list.
really.
Which is funny to me. I don't know why. I'm just like, huh? Yeah, I guess you do have a backpack, huh? Um, so yeah, we have we're talking about thematic and mechanic, and I don't know if we want to stick with this, Evan, but like we said, if we think that both work, we call it a success. If they both, we say both don't work, it's a failure. If thematically it succeeds and mechanically it fails, or vice versa, it's a contradiction.
Kind of like a wash or a contradiction, yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like the game is full of each of these, a lot of
And
contradiction, which is why it's so worth
the
like talking
popular
about.
phrase for that is ludonarrative dissonance, which
Yeah, okay.
I
All
have
right,
written about
we
myself
said
as
the no word.
we said the no where I'm going to throw it out
It's
there, but
out
that's the
there
reason that we talked about this because it's
for
like
sure.
are they the contradiction is that state of emotional kind of like disconnect
Yeah,
when you're talking about a video game,
I
and I
think
think
it's.
that this game is kind of at odds with itself
Uh,
naturally just by nature of what it is and who's publishing it.
I agree, and it's also because it's like that prestige game, right? Video games have been trying so hard to be like we're not just games, we're interactive medium, we're interactive experiences.
They
We
want to
want to
be
be
seen as
taken
blockbuster
seriously.
movies.
Exactly. And so it is kind of at odds with itself because the way it presents its story is through that experience of playing it and interacting with it. And so I think it when it works better than a movie or a book. And then when it doesn't, it's at odds with itself. You're right. Like we'll get into it with some of these later parts. But there's some things where it's like it's weird because when I'm reminded that it's a video game, it takes me out of it, and yet it is a video game. So then I'm like, but video games are fun, and yeah. So it's an interesting little dilemma. So let's talk about backpacks, I guess.
Yeah, I want to talk about backpacks, and the reason I want to talk about backpacks, and I will be point blank about it. Former Kotaku writer and currently independent guy living out of a hotel, Tim Rogers, decided to venture off and do his own video series. And I watched his 3 hour video on the first Last of Us video game, and like a thing really stuck out to me that his adoration of The Last of Us, the first one, and Death Stranding really got
Hmm.
him into backpacking. And it really made
Okay.
me think about this, and that's like that was the first thing that came to my mind because it is such a unique thing where in a video game when you're using the interactivity of your menu system and your gear, how seamlessly does it interact? So for instance, when people talk about like the Legend of Zelda and Link's bottomless backpack or bottomless like
Right.
magic sack, but then alternatively you have things like the Ghostbusters game from like 15 years ago, and everything is in on the backpack. Like the UI is the what were those things? I feel like a terrible nerd for not remember the name of the
I have no memory of this,
you
so
know what
you're
I mean?
better than nerd
But
than
like
I am.
Dead Space is another example where the
Right.
UI and all of your tools and interactivity is very constrained to this small amount of space,
Well, I
and
think we'll talk
it
about
works
Dead Space.
very.
I think Dead Space draws from the game that I always compare it to when we're talking about user interface and backpack and storage space, and that's Resident Evil 4. I
Mm,
feel like nothing is really. I mean, Dead Space is basically Resident Evil 4
because you have a
in space.
confined space that you can put everything into.
Yes, and specifically everything like takes like a grid of that space, and you have to physically like move it around. I feel like it's fine that you don't have to do that in The Last of Us. I kind of buy that you have limits to what your backpack can hold. It is kind of funny when you're like really in the thick of it and like you're getting chased by a zombie. You're like, okay, wait a second, zip. You
Yeah,
just like take a knee and like let
but
me.
Honestly, compared to other things, it's not the most ridiculous. I
Oh,
mean, if you need to like quickly heal, I guess, but
yeah. I mean,
also it's like
it's
it's more believable than the actual act of I'm on the edge of possibly dying. This gauze with some alcohol is going to keep me going just fine.
yeah. I mean, it's still more believable than stopping time to eat like 40 wheels of cheese, which is like the
Yeah,
Bethesda spectrum. So I don't
or
know.
or like Snake Eater, I guess would be like another example of that kind of thing. But that's like that storage space is absolutely limitless. But it's more about, I guess that's more about the fact that like Snake will like in the middle of like being hunted down sit down and like eat an entire like snake or like buffalo carcass.
Yeah, ludonarrative dissonance right
Yeah,
there.
right,
All right.
exactly, ultimate examples. But
So if we're talking like our constraints here, do you think like mechanically would you call that a success?
I think that
Does it
it
work?
is. I think that it's piggybacking on the success of it
Mm-hmm.
working in the first game. It doesn't really
Mm-hmm.
do a whole lot different. I haven't
True.
played the first game in a while, but even the first game did the thing where because you have on your D-pad, up is your healing items, down is your explosives, if I recall correctly, and then left is your long range larger weapons, and your right is your pistols. And as you progress through the game, you get one additional quick access holster for each
Each of those.
type of
Yeah.
gun. And that feels like an actually good uh, reward system for
Mm-hmm.
making you feel like you're getting better at the combat. Um, but really, all it is just a simple UI addition to just make moving around way
Easier.
easier on yourself. I don't recall if auto crafting silencers was a thing in the first game. Do you remember?
I I don't remember the silencers. I don't think so.
The silencers were in the first game. I just don't remember if there was a quick action button in that
Oh, that's
D-pad
right. To like
UI
to
to
shove it in.
automatically
That's
build it
right. I
instead of
I don't
going
think
into the
that was.
backpack.
I think The Last of Us Part Two has a lot of those little quality of life things in general, like the switching between ammunition types and
Yes.
like while you're in the UI. That's something that's
Yeah,
nice.
it's very clean. It makes it
Yeah.
very clear, like especially when you get the bow and arrow
Oh yeah.
and you're able to quickly swap between the incendiary. And I mean, look, this is stuff that's been done like in like Breath of the Wild. It's not like it's revolutionary, but
It's
they
so nice.
they really pick and choose which ones they give you to keep with the survivalist thematics, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. So,
Um, sorry, go ahead.
well, it's talking about thematically. If we're kind of going back and forth. At first, I was like, yeah, it's kind of silly that you're running around with a backpack everywhere. But then I thought about it, and it's like, no. Right now, in a real pandemic, everyone's walking around with a mask. It's totally believable that for this pandemic in the game, everyone's running around with a backpack. It's just, I guess that's the thing everyone's doing for this. And so I kind of came around. At first, I was about to call this a contradiction and say thematically it's kind of weird against like, running around trying to survive. But I've come around. I think the backpack is sort of like, and like, it kind of makes sense because if you bought like, what is it called? I think it's literally called the backpack edition. Like the
Oh, is
super
it really?
yeah, there's like the super primo. There's like the Ellie edition, which comes like the figure, and I think they literally called it like it's either like the Ellie Supreme. I don't know, but like it came with her backpack. So the backpack, I guess, is like
Is that like a what?
the iconic thing of The Last of Us Part
Ellie
Two.
Supreme is new to me, so
The Ellie Supreme edition. I mean, that's what the real gamers bought. Um, yeah, but it literally came with her backpack. So I actually do think that I'd call the backpack a success if you would agree with me.
I definitely agree with that. I put
All
it
right.
on here because I like what it is.
All right.
And it feels like it is the quintessential version of a believable rucksack of survival items in almost any video game.
I
That
think
said, I kind of put slash UI on here because
mhm.
I didn't really know where to put like accessibility, but
I was just going to mention that. I want to give a
because
huge
this
shout out to
game
them
has really good accessibility. Like
for
before you even
sure.
launch the game, not only does it give you like really maneuverable difficulty settings
Hmm.
that are kind of only on par with something like Celeste. It's not just a simple like easy, normal, hard. It allows you to adjust things that you find specifically challenging. Um,
Yes.
but I brought up the UI in this regard because it allows you to change the color scheme even
Hmm.
and the text size, and it's just a very customizable interface that allows it, like somebody that would have like a hard time seeing certain color blindness, I guess, is pretty much like the
Hmm.
gist of that. But yeah, I was just really impressed. Like from Go, you had the ability to make those settings exactly how you wanted, and I just kind of like squeezed that in there. There's no real thematic tie-in on it,
Yeah.
but
I
I felt like giving it props there.
I no, I completely agree. I've been playing a lot of Star Wars Battlefront 2 with a friend of mine, and she's always complaining about how small the text is, and there's just nothing you can do about it. And I mean, I feel like a cynic could argue that like Sony wants this to be accessible by everyone because it's like their prestige, and so of course they want everyone to play it. But if the benefit is that everyone's looking at this and being like, "Hey, this is really cool," and it is more accessible, especially if someone, you know, has something that prevents them from kind of connecting with a lot of games, and hopefully this sort of sets a good precedent going forward. That like, hey, for your big games, these are easy things you can kind of include, and then more people will enjoy it. Yeah, I do think that's great. So kudos for that.
When we were editing your review on the website,
Yeah.
there's another main character that I felt like there was something specific that could have been added in that accessibility that we'll talk about later when we get to
Oh, you're
storylines.
talking about Lev.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
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 So we'll talk about Lev when we get back to that. Spoilers, by the way. I'm gonna edit this so that people know that there's spoilers.
Oh yeah, full spoil. We're talking about just
Full
gameplay now.
disclosure, all spoilers, everything's up for grabs. If you haven't played or watched, um, you know, go home, come back.
Yeah.
I'll upload the audio.
Beat it,
So
spend the 30 hours of your life or whatever, come back.
yeah, oh god, yeah, that's another thing that we'll end up talking about. I'm sure is the pace of
The,
it.
the length,
Um,
yeah, the pace too.
the length, and it's so subjective. So
That's yeah, which is why again why it's worth talking about because I feel like this game on a lot of things for some people it really clicks, for others it really turns them off with like
yeah.
everything.
Do you
So,
want to talk about that now, or you want to talk about that on like the back end of talking about like the mechanical stuff?
uh, which one? What thing specifically? Just like the pace?
Specifically, the pacing and the length of the game.
You know, I guess we could talk about a little bit now and get more into it later because I think the biggest shock is realizing, you know, like the switch to Abby and like the dawning. There's a big spoiler. You play as Abby, um,
But
but
there's not a big spoiler because you play as her in a chapter towards the beginning.
that's true. That's
You
true.
just don't know
There's
what role she's going to play.
exactly, and I think like when it switched to Abby, like at the end of Seattle Day 3, and they had like that confrontation in the theater, I was under the assumption that like, oh, I'm playing as Abby just for like a little bit to like. I kind of knew like, oh, we're gonna see like from her perspective, kind of like what we did before, and I thought it'd be a one-off mission. I thought you'd get enough, like you had like the one upgrade tree, and I thought like, oh, this is
You're like,
all.
oh, this is yeah. It
This is
kind of
it.
clicks where you're like, oh,
It's
wait, am
like
I
a 4 or 5 hour.
starting
Yes, and then like once I got like the second book of upgrades, and I saw like, okay, you know, I can upgrade these ones, and then like that third locked thing shows up. That's when it hit me. Oh, I'm gonna be
Oh,
playing.
you
I'm gonna
mean
be
like
playing as
when
her
it
for
went
a,
from only like two visible ones to
yes,
like
and
three? I see.
to the third one that popped, the third potential one. I realized, okay, that's probably gonna go up straight up to 5. We're Seattle Day 1. We got 2 other days, baby. Okay, and so I think once you get past that initial shock and you realize, oh, this is a much because at first I was like, wow, okay, this is gonna be like a 20, you know, 20 like 18-hour game. All right, you know, that's fine, I guess. But then I realized, oh wait, this is gonna be like double that. And so
Yeah, I kind of figured when we switched over to Abby after that hard cut from the moment in the theater, I figured we were going to see what her story was like all the way from that through to the end, especially because it was starting so early in her story point from
right.
that cutting time. That said, I wasn't sure if they were going to dedicate an equal amount of gameplay time to it, and it kind of felt like more. Um,
I actually that's a good question for you because when I was at least for the first half when I was playing Abby, I was blowing through it. I was just jamming because I thought it was small. I thought it was gonna be short, and I wanted to get back to like that cliffhanger. And then once I realized, okay, I'm here for the long haul, I kind of slowed down with her. But like I think I played like 18 hours as Ellie, and I ended up playing only as like 10 to 12 as Abby.
okay. I would say so. Here's what ended up happening. I I adjusted my difficulty partway through.
Okay,
The town just before you meet back up with Jesse when you're playing with as Ellie.
right.
I got kind of stumped there because there was a lot of dogs and a lot of people. So what I had
Oh, the
I
dogs are the
had
worst.
yeah I we'll get to that. I don't even
We'll
want to.
get we'll
I
get
don't
to the
want to.
dogs.
Look, I don't want to kill the dogs. I just don't. Okay.
Oh, I got over that hella quick.
Okay.
The first time I saw dogs, I was trying not to kill them. I was trying to avoid them, and they caught me 3 times. Now it's just you kill Fido on sight. It's just
It's a
that's
shame.
that's what I came down to, and
So that was kind of actually the dogs was my breaking point of kind of like disassociating from the story and kind of not feeling like I'm engrossed with Ellie and more a cinematographer. But
mm-hmm,
but as far as the pacing goes, here's what happened was I was being very conscious because you were playing the game on your own, but Dylan was watching me play it, and so
mm-hmm.
therefore it was kind of like a movie, and I was the cameraman as the game was rendering,
Oh, it's
and
fascinating.
we
Yeah.
were both getting kind of engrossed in it. And the reason I say that is I like to scour a map for materials, especially having played the first game. I like
Same.
to have to like stock up on as many supplies as I can,
Yep.
which is kind of boring unless you're actively reading the letters, which I also was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to be able to kind of get through the game a little more brisk, so that way we didn't get like spoiled on things. So I went into those accessibility settings, and what I did was I turned down the enemy AI and turned up the crafting tool uh, supplies, and that's it.
Right.
That's all that.
Nice.
That's all that really changed. Um, I specify that because we probably got through Ellie's section of playthrough, as in beginning to the movie theater cut off, probably in like 15 hours, and
Okay.
then I think it was almost 30. So it was a little less than half, realistically thinking that we did playtime as Abby. Um, but it feels like a very different game, and the reason I say that is that we were going to talk about the survival stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I didn't know because some people were saying that Abby's section of the game felt more like a traditional shooter. Like you can kind of like go in and blow through stuff because you generally have more materials, but also
Mm-hmm.
um, you still have to kind of like scrap for stuff. Like you still have to craft the shivs, even though Ellie also
Right.
has her switchblade. So it's kind of like this weird, very delicate balance because it allows you to play how you want, but each of these characters are kind of pushing you to play to their personal
I
strengths.
I completely agree. And so we're talking about like, should we talk about mechanics of the characters? And I think so because like, at first I was doing, like I said, I was blowing past Abby, the Abby chapters, partially because I wanted to progress the story, but also because I think that's how she was built. Like she's a freaking tank. Like
Yeah,
you see her,
she is a tank, and also
and
like you end up in these wolf areas and you're picking up ammunition left and right, like more than Ellie
yes,
could ever scrounge for. Like
and like
just because you
even
have to craft the shivs doesn't mean that you're at a disadvantage as that character.
and I think the fact that so like Ellie, she has her knife, which is like unlimited stealth takedowns, and I think that suits her playstyle. Like she has the bow and arrow. She's more about the stealth and the picking off, and like she's more fragile. And I feel like her long range options, her options for stealth takedowns were way more advanced. Where like with Abby's, it was a resource where it's like, okay, you have to do this, but at a cost. Whereas like her thing that she had for free was like the fact that she had like 50% more health And then also like she had the upgrade where like if you got a melee kill, you could just go into another instant melee kill right
Oh,
after.
I never even noticed that. Or
That
if I
upgrade,
did it, I didn't. Oh, it was an upgrade. I must have.
upgrades, people. It was
Um,
one of
but
her
even
like
still, on the same token, like when she crafts a pipe bomb, first of all,
momentum is what it's called.
momentum, the
Yeah.
pipe bombs. She's got a
Yes.
twofer on crafting pipe bombs.
Mm-hmm.
So she's just much more resourceful. Like each of them are resourceful in different aspects that
Exactly.
their scenarios need them to be.
I think Abby was way more built for guns blazing, like a freight train crashing through.
Yeah,
Um,
and a lot of people actually said that Abby's playthrough, either in terms of the quality of the set pieces, which we'll get to, and just the weapons and gear and having to craft the shivs, feels more how playing Joel did in the
yes,
first game.
I agree. At first, I really enjoyed the fact I had unlimited shit because I love stealth takedowns. That's way more fun for me.
Yeah,
I it's very rare to get like a full stealth game that I really like engage with. So I try to play it more as a stealth game than an action game. So I was like, oh yeah, Ellie with her knife, hell yeah. And then I was really disappointed that Abby had to craft shivs again. But
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. I was mad to have to craft shivs, but I understand it for playing as Abby as opposed to Ellie because I feel like that differentiates. And it did. I feel like the game is very directly trying to show you that Abby is in a lot of ways like Joel, with especially with like how she befriends Lev and her redemption is pretty much through Lev, just like how Joel's was through Ellie in the first one.
yeah.
So
It's very interesting, and we'll get to that in the character discussion. But they do really have like a bunch of narrative parallels. Like
for sure.
Ellie and Abby feel like the same person from two different walks of life. But I hadn't thought about the fact that Abby is actually very comparable to Joel.
Hmm.
Um, another thing that I wanted to mention was because of how similar Abby's gameplay feels to Joel's from the first game, and the fact that this is like a sequel, and everybody went in knowing that Ellie was going to be the main character from the get go. Do you think that the game would have had better feeling pacing or better gameplay balance if you were going back and forth as Ellie and Abby like you were in the prologue, or do you think that the way they broke it up like that actually works? Because I
That's
think
a
they
good
did it.
question.
I think they did it the best way that they could because I feel like
Yeah.
it was damned if they did, damned if they didn't because
Yeah.
people were going to hate Abby for killing Joel,
Oh, no matter what. Yeah.
but you play her in the beginning and it's not like you hate her by default until she kills Joel. But
Yeah.
if you're going back and forth between Ellie's gameplay being distinctively what it is and Abby's having killed Joel and making her gameplay just like Joel's, and you're playing the same scenarios back and forth like GTA 5 style, I
Hmm.
feel like that would have made the gameplay less good, but I
I
don't know if you agree with that.
I no, I think I agree. I think it's ultimately a bigger risk to do it the way they did it, but a bigger payoff because it is such a shock to the system where
It is.
you're playing as Ellie and you're just like, I hate this woman. I'm gonna get her. I'm John Wick. I have my hit list. I'm going through it, and then you're like, whoop, now take a
Yeah.
walk in her
Wind
shoes,
back the
literally.
clock. Yeah.
Yeah, and so but again, I think if you're kind of switching back and forth, because like I think one of the what's also really good is if you play it. I'm going through my second playthrough right now, a new game plus,
Mm.
and I am now seeing like sort of a lot of the stuff that like Abby's chapters set up by seeing day one again through Ellie's eyes, and I feel like you wouldn't get that comparison if you were switching back and forth all the time because I feel like it's more powerful to go through everything that Ellie did, and then like when you play as Abby, on day three when you go back to the aquarium, like it doesn't matter how much good I did. She's gonna show up
Even just
and
the
see
hospital and
what.
going
Yeah, in the hospital.
yeah,
Yeah.
like that was the part, that was the set piece where it really struck me when I'm like walking around and all the wolf people are there
Mhm.
and Abby's doing her own version of sneaking into the same
Yes.
facility, into a place that she's not supposed to be.
Hmm.
She's kind of hiding in plain sight, but I'm looking at the environment, recalling what I had to do
Yep.
as Ellie, and it's the
Yep.
exact same terrain and feels completely different. And there might
Yeah.
have been even other areas earlier in the game
And I
in her
think
chapters that felt like that, but that was the one that really kind of clicked for me.
I totally agree. And yeah, that was the moment where I'm like, oh, I killed these exact people as Ellie. I was in this exact same spot. I know that dog. And
Yeah,
I think if you did that right after you had done that as Ellie, that
it'd have
comparison
been
would have fallen.
redundant.
It would have been it would have been yeah, it would have been too repetitive. It would have been too soon. So I think the way they did it was good with the Switch.
Yeah.
I agree.
Um,
I think pacing wise and as far as like leveling out the gameplay experience, I can see the argument for like you have like your stealth chapters with Ellie, your action chapters with Abby, and you're kind of going back and forth. But I think overall experience wise, I like what they did.
yeah, I agree, and I don't even know if I would say that Abby's chapters are entirely action based. I mean, they certainly
No,
are more so,
I think there's
but
more. I think like I just said it in the review too that like the game works best when you kind of hybrid it. You kind of go in and out of stealth and action. You kind of find a balance. And I feel like Ellie is like 60% stealth, 40%
yeah, they kind of
guns
each have their
blazing,
own.
and then Abby is more 60% guns blazing, 40% stealth. Because like
Yeah,
you still gotta pick people off. You can't unless you're New Game Plus and oh my god, have you played New Game Plus yet?
I haven't touched it yet.
Oh my lord. Go back to Seattle Day because you keep all of your weapons with the upgrades.
Oh,
So
okay,
and
yeah.
all of your so go back and play Seattle Day 1 with the explosive arrows on Ellie.
Whoa.
And
Oh,
you remember the moment when like you're in the I just played this today where like you're in like the TV broadcasting studio
yeah,
and 10 dudes run into that hallway
yeah.
and you're like up above them and you're watching it and when all you have is like the pistol, the rifle, the shotgun, you're like, "Oh no." But when you have the explosive arrows, you're saying, "Oh yes." And
Yeah,
oof. But
interesting because I that was probably one of my least favorite set pieces, or one of the set pieces I forgot about
you
first.
you negate
And
it. You negate it with the explosive arrows.
yeah,
But
it seems like you just kind of blow through it.
but but what I'm
Um,
saying is that like you only do that once you have like the firepower and what I'm saying is that like Abby has more firepower from the beginning. So she is a bit more able to you pick a couple people off with stealth and you can finish the rest off in action. Whereas I feel like with Ellie, it's sort of the reverse, where you have to do the majority of it in stealth and pick your moments to go action.
do you think that the gameplay decision in that kind of breakdown is equally thematically successful?
That's a good question.
Because that is kind of what Ellie has to do, and also Abby almost consistently the whole time always kind of has the literal upper hand in terms of strength, skill, combat. I mean, not that I mean Ellie's a good character, but she
Mhm.
just barely survives each time she goes up against Abby, and pretty much
Yeah. Well, I think, like I said, the stealth feels better as Ellie. I will say, especially if you have the bow and you get the rangefinder upgrade. Oh, mwah,
mm,
chef's kiss. It's even better than the crossbow, which I really enjoyed, but the fact that you can't craft your own ammo really hinders it. So I think Ellie is a little bit more crafty, actually. Like I feel like all the stuff that she can make as far as like Molotovs, arrows, explosive arrows are better. Whereas I feel like the arsenal of Abby, like her default weapons are better, like the hunting pistol, the double barrel
oh yeah,
shotgun, the
no doubt.
flamethrower.
Um, and in that regard, Ellie would not have been able to handle that friggin' boss fight in that
Exactly.
hospital basement
Oh,
where
the
it
Rat
was
King.
basically. Is that
Yes,
what you call him, the Rat King?
that's what its name is.
Excuse me, its name is the Rat King.
Yeah, do you know what a rat king? A rat king is like when a bunch of sewer rats get together and their tails get so entangled,
I only
they're
know it in
inseparable.
context of the Nutcracker.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. An actual rat king, and these are really gross. They're like all these rats entangled together. So the idea is that this is like 4 or 5 of these infected that are merged. That's why it's why it's like it rips like part of it off itself and throws it away, and that's its own
Oh,
separate boss.
that's yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty
Fun.
disgusting.
It's terrible. It's terrifying, but it works what they're doing.
That is quite literally what it is. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that's probably that's technically the only boss fight of the game, isn't it? Probably.
I mean, there's the bloaters, like so right.
I don't
Abby,
count those.
Really? Like when
I
you
count
first,
those as just really difficult encounters.
I think that's a boss for Ellie. That's a boss. I'd
For
say like
Ellie,
when
it is. This is true.
you're in. So I guess that shows you like the the levels, the
Yeah.
power levels of Abby versus Ellie, right? That her bloater is is the Rat King for Abby. Yeah, I'd say that's a boss fight for Ellie. Like when you're in the boat and like you just stumble into the arcade and he's there.
Yeah,
So
but doesn't she? She takes out a couple of them before that in the
is
tunnels
she?
underneath.
No,
The
so those are Shamblers, which is the
Oh,
new
I'm
enemy in the game.
sorry. I'm sorry.
The bloater was
I
the
kept
big one.
confusing them.
They are very much the same enemy. It's just Shamblers are
One
like
spits
diet
acid.
bloaters. Yeah. One pops acid out of it in an AoE. The other one hucks acid at you, which is worse.
My mistake.
Yeah, they're to be fair though, they're very easy to confuse because they're all just angry mushroom people.
Yes.
We've gone from the Goombas in Mario to the killer mushrooms. Look how video games have evolved.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Goombas from the Mario movie.
I guess they're in here too. We have taken a massive tangent from. I like how we're like we need to make a structure for ourselves because that will.
We were talking about it's the semantics of the science fiction lore.
Yeah. So I guess survival, would we call that a success?
I think so.
I'd say so. I think we've kind of
on both aspects of both characters. Not only are they successes in how they function as gameplay, they
it makes sense with the world
appropriate for their character.
Yeah, you have to fight to survive. Even if you're Abby and you can take more hits, you can't take unlimited hits. So I'd say that. And then
we talked about stealth already a little bit. Do you have any other thoughts on it?
I've kind of gone back and forth in it because in my review I talked about how I feel like I'm so conditioned by typical stealth games that like when I get caught I consider it a failure.
Yeah. Weird, right? And then this one, it's kind of not. You kind of have
in
to
this game,
scrap together some kind of other scenario.
You feel extra stressed because like of the audio, like that little like that. There's nothing that makes my heart drop more than that bang, like that gong, whatever that is, of like, oh, you just got spotted.
Especially because my training on stealth games was Metal Gear Solid, and pretty much the go-to thing is if you didn't sneak properly and you get caught,
you die.
Reload the game.
Yes.
The last checkpoint. And you do it right. But this game, and
you just keep going, you keep trucking.
It feels the way that Uncharted 4 did, and we kind of touched on that. I remember we talked about that as we were editing your review, and Uncharted 4 did that where those games were previously just all blow through it with action, and the fourth game added gently some stealth mechanics so that
that's right
you could pick off a few people, and if you were really lucky and you were bored of the regular combat, I guess you could
take the time
room, but really what would happen was you would make it a little easier for yourself to pick off a few of them and then go in with the actual combat. So you could basically strategize a position in the set piece for yourself. This series is kind of doing the opposite direction a little bit, where it starts core with stealth and it's slowly integrating in scenarios where you're using action combat. But the fundamental thing is the same as Uncharted 4, where you start in a little bit stealth and you will eventually get caught because these enemies are not dumb, and you can either just finish them off, you can blow through to the other side of the thing, which I did a couple of times when I was low on materials, or you can try to hide again, and it's all of those things are possible. One thing I did note is one of the games critics out there that I follow, she mentioned that she got to a point where she wanted to try to not kill anybody, like she was kind of like over killing like the wolves or something like that. And so she would just find a way to like sneak in or run right through, and it's totally possible. So, I mean, I didn't, but that's because
I didn't either.
I like going through and turning a place upside down to find materials, but that's just a specific kind of gameplay.
I think the other thing too is that like my gripe with it, like, oh, it feels like a failure. It feels like it's not like a stealth game. Also, like I didn't customize the difficulty. I was like committed to playing through as like whenever I play a video game, I usually just play through like the normal mode to see like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what the designers intended. But
Right.
like for my new game plus, I'm like, whatever. I'm gonna do what I think is more fun for me. And so what I did is I turned down like enemies like detection like way low, but their
Hmm.
lethality way high. So
Oh, so like if they find you, you're dead.
if they find me, I'm dead. I can literally
Yeah.
take 2 shots in an entire encounter before I'm dead. However, it was way more forgiving with the stealth, and I can pluck people off, and it felt like a stealth game at that point.
Right.
So I think because of the granularity of the difficulty setting and the fact that it's possible to like what that game critic did and just get by anything without killing anybody,
Mm.
I'd give the stealth a success. But I was kind of on the fence about it, but literally like 2 days ago, I haven't gone through New Game Plus a bit and talking to other people who said like, oh, I didn't kill the dogs at all. I got by them. I'm like, well, okay, you're better than I was. I'll give it a success for the stealth.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Even if you customize it, it's pretty successful because that's
Yeah.
just what the root of the first game was. It's just that it takes that and builds on it either with character specific things like Ellie's Switchblade
Mhm.
or with other tools. I don't even remember if you were able to install remote bombs like you were able to in this game in the first one, but if that's an addition,
I
that's a
think I think you had pipe bombs as Joel. It's been I
yeah.
need to play The Last of Us 1. But
I
he
know. I recently I re-updated my PlayStation 3 so I could go back and look at it again.
I don't, so yeah, well, I'm willing to give stealth a success because we're gonna move on to melee combat, and I think it sucks. So,
Yeah.
what do you feel about melee combat? I don't
I
like
don't.
it.
I mean, okay, so I got better at it.
Yeah,
let's
that's
put it
fair.
that way. But so here's the thing in regards to because the stealth is where you have the most control. So if we're gonna talk
Yes,
about a thematic tie-in to how the melee combat works, it's the same way that the gunplay combat works. In that, when you start out, it is challenging. It's purposefully messy because the game intends it to be, and it actively makes it easier for you to do those things as you upgrade your abilities and gear.
I I can see that point. I agree with that when it comes to the weapons. I still feel like the actual act of the melee combat just doesn't feel good. It's like the one mechanic thing that I felt like was off. I don't know. I guess I'm coming off of it after playing a lot of The Witcher 3, which is sort of similar in the melee in terms of like, okay, they're winding up an attack. I got to parry, or I got to dodge, dodge, dodge. Okay, there's
It
my hit,
is.
hit, hit,
It's pretty
dodge, dodge,
slow.
dodge, hit, hit, hit. And but the thing was like
Yeah.
The Witcher 3 is you have like your lock-on mechanics, you have your oils and your other things to enhance that experience. Whereas I feel like with this game, the melee, like you can upgrade your damage, you can upgrade your durability of your items, but the
You can
core,
upgrade your ability to dodge, by the way, or at least I did as Abby.
yeah, that's true. So it's there, but the fundamental experience is still if you see them
Square,
winding up,
square,
you
square,
dodge.
square, square.
Yeah, it's
Dodge.
L1 square, L1 square, L1 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 square
But is it
square.
really that different than any time you've done that in Uncharted?
No, but I don't like the melee combat in Uncharted either.
Yeah, no, it's always kind of an
the one
afterthought,
thing
isn't it?
the one thing with Uncharted is that like the one thing that he knew is like, okay, in every action game they just mash the button anyway, so you just mash square, and that's what I want to do in The Last of Us 2 is just mash square, but the game punishes you because they're like, okay,
It
well this
wants you
enemy,
to be punished.
yeah, this enemy is smart and they have a big hammer and they can block it and then they can hit you. So
Yes.
I really don't like it's serviceable. Like you said, I've gotten better too. And if like it at first I really didn't like the combat because it's like very shaky and zoom in and whatever. It does look good when you get good at the melee. Like it's funny. I've been watching Yasmin, who also Yasmin Kleinbart, who also writes for the young folks. She's been playing through it, and she does like primarily melee. And so it's
Interesting.
I
Because she
know
wants to, or because she ends up in those situations?
both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think because she tries out with the stealth, and then like when it goes bad for her, she defaults to melee. When it breaks bad for me, I whip out the shotgun every time. That's my
Yeah, so see, for me, I think I was able to avoid melee as best as possible because I actually would try to take stuff out at a range. Like
Same.
I would do it like I would do in Metal Gear Solid, where I go for a headshot as best as
Yes.
humanly possible.
Yes, yes,
And the
yes. Same thing
game
here.
encouraged me to be less specific and careful and patient with that, like I am in any other stealth game, because
Hmm.
of how shaky that is. And the longer that
Yes.
you hold it, the less stable that your shot is.
Yes.
Um, except as I had a really hard time determining if I was getting better, or the game, or the upgrades mechanically, either in the skill tree or on the crafting bench, were actually just making it easier for me. And I think it was kind of a marriage of both things, because by the end of
That's
the
fair.
game, especially at the end of Abby's run, I was getting headshots just like I was in any other game that I would want to
Yep.
be able to do that in.
Yeah.
So it it really is an interesting progressive skill, and even if there is an illusion, it felt good to be able to do that. Even in a game where I was at that point very exhausted of mercilessly, brutally killing people over and over again, it got to a point where the kill was getting satisfying, which really
Yes.
scares me.
Yeah. I'll give you that. So I guess we're kind of going back and forth between melee and weapon combat because
They feel because they're kind of like in the
they're all
same way
intertwined.
that the actual stealth versus combat encounter is so intrinsically balanced. Like those two smaller aspects of the combat are balanced as well.
Like I said, I think the game wants that kind of hybrid where you spend a little bit of resources here, a little bit of resources here. Like you spend 2 charges of your hammer or machete or whatever over here, and then
Yeah.
you pull out your gun and you spend bullets here, and then you duck under cover, and then you can get a stealth kill. It's supposed to all blend together, but to me at least, the melee was always my last resort. It was like, oh, someone's in my face, I'm gonna
But
spam square.
technically it should be if you're thinking about it thematically too.
Yeah, I agree. But then we talk about, and we're gonna talk about the Quicktime events too, right? Like the moments where like you get like, I think it happens like twice as Abby, where like you get yanked by a brute enemy, and it's like, oh, your backpack is gone. Time to duke it out, Indiana
Yeah.
Jones style. And it's
God,
like,
they
okay,
really do love doing that, don't they?
I just
Especially
and
Naughty
it's
Dog.
I know, and it's like her version of a boss battle because but it's a contrivance, which annoys me. And I don't know. To me, of the core gameplay mechanics, melee is the weakest. That's what I'm saying.
I would agree with that, and I think
So if we're
that
calling it a success, failure, or contradiction, where are you landing? I think I'll default to your decision because
I
I'm
think it's
I'm
an
lukewarm.
accidental success,
Okay,
if that makes
that's
sense.
that's, that's fair because I guess thematically it's the one thing you wouldn't want to do.
Thematically it works. Gameplay, it's really frustrating and messy, and it feels like that they addressed that last, or
Mm,
not as efficiently. But also, like, were they encouraging you to do all the other things first because the other characters would be doing that? Yes. But does that sound like an excuse? Also, yes.
okay, all right, we'll give it a. Well, sure. Let's move on to it's sort of between a success and a contradiction.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Because I agree. Thematically, I
Happy
think it really
accident.
works. Yeah. Weapons combat. Now, see, I feel like this one's a good contradiction. And you talked about it a little bit, like being scared, how
Yeah.
fun it felt. Because, like,
Yeah.
mechanically, the weapon design is so good. Like,
Yeah.
if like the power of the guns themselves, like you feel it. You pull the trigger of the revolver, you get a headshot
I
with the revolver.
I
You see
felt
those little
a personal relationship with each of those weapons by the end of
yes.
each of those two characters'
Oh my gosh.
playthroughs, like the way
That's a
that
good way to put
Solid
it.
Snake feels about his pistol.
The personal relationship. That's true because like the first time I played through, like that the revolver was my thing. Like when I had to, I called it like the closer. Like okay,
Oh, sure.
and then my other thing is like when it broke bad, it was always the shotgun, and then my new game plus, and like later on once I upgraded it, the bow also, and then the crossbow is
Sure.
Abby. Like like the weapon design is very good mechanically, so good, and like really the appeal of the game on New Game Plus is getting to go back and replay earlier missions with your full arsenal because it is so fun to use. And I think thematically that is such an opposite message of what like if the game has a message
But
where like
also, So you mean in the core gameplay, or you mean when you go back for New Game Plus?
Both, but I mean,
I
it's
think
it's
New Game
more
Plus it's kind of negated because you've already experienced the story, so you're kind of like going back through and doing it for the gameplay. I think they probably recognize that.
yes, but that's what I mean. Like I said earlier, like when you're reminded that like this is a game,
Yeah.
it takes you out of it. Like
Yes, and
I found myself
it does
comparing
that
it.
a lot.
I found myself comparing this game a lot to Doom Eternal because that's the
Which
other
I
game I've
haven't
been playing a lot
played,
in
so you
quarantine.
can tell me a
Oh,
little more
love it.
specific on that.
Love it. But what I mean is that like that game is like people talk about like the violence, right, of both this
Mhm.
game and like obviously Doom Eternal. The violence is it's astronomical, right?
But that's like absurdist
Exactly.
cartoon level because
That's what I'm
that's what
saying.
Doom was known for. It's like a
That's
1990s
and
like
Doom
Evil Dead
Eternal
2 splat stick
and what I'm
violence.
saying is that Doom Eternal is very aware that it's a game. Like
Yeah.
you unlock cheat codes and you find toys, like
Yeah.
Funko Pops of the
Yeah, yeah,
enemies.
yeah.
And like there's like the upgrades for the guns feel like making them like goofy and overpowered. Whereas I feel like the guns in The Last of Us, you upgrade them to make them usable, not to make them
Right. Because it's technically got its roots in survival horror, but
yeah.
it's also a AAA game where violent gunplay combat is the essential thing. See, this is like where the whole weird contradiction of like ludonarrative dissonance is like a problem
Narrative.
because it's the game's themes
Yeah.
are about why that's bad, but it's
Then
also a revenge plot.
yeah, it's that's the weird part, right? Is like the message of the game is that like violence is bad, it's good to move past it and forgive, right? Like that's sort of the
You know,
conclusion.
I'm not even sure if that's what it is. I think that's what we're getting out of it because that's what we want to see in games in a post Undertale world. And it's been a thing on my mind with video games lately because I recently played all the way through Nier Automata for the first time and I'm trying to finish Death
Hmm.
Stranding. And those three games that I just mentioned very specifically all have uh, themes of pacifism, and the
Hmm.
one that does it the most blatantly is Undertale. In Nier and in Death Stranding, it's more about kind of like making sacrifices and coming together as people and finding solutions besides murder.
Hmm.
And the game otherwise the gameplay is just kind of gameplay. But in this, it's a Sony published AAA game where there are pre-order bonuses that give you extreme weapons upgrades,
Yeah.
and it has a level of production design that makes you kind of, or at least made me kind of like retch and like squirm in my sofa
Oh
every
yeah.
time I heard a character choking on their blood.
Oh yeah.
And again,
Every time you commit
murdering a dog.
yeah. Oh my god, the sound design of the dog deaths
All
is
of the sound design in the game is top notch,
yeah.
but the death murder sounds are all bad. Yeah, Dylan's in chat and he's like, "Oy vey, it was awful," and he was just watching.
Yeah, and it's
the
worse when
death
you're watching someone else
death
do it.
murder.
You don't really like register it, but I was watching Yasmin play it, and like she did like the stealth like kill as Ellie, and before you upgrade it, you slit the throat, and you have to hold them there, and they're literally like
And here's the
reaching
thing:
back and slapping you.
every
Oh
time I would do that as Ellie, one, I would dread doing it because I knew I was going to hear those sounds, and
yeah,
two, I'm always tilting the camera so that
away.
I'm looking directly at the throat being cut because I need to see if somebody's creeping up behind me because Ellie
That's
is taking
actually true.
forever to do it. So while I'm checking our six, Ellie is slowly murdering this person
It's that scene
right in
in
front of
Saving
my
Private
face.
Ryan every time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the box cutter Breaking Bad like
Oh
times five.
yeah, it's every time, and it's weird, right? Because like we talked about like the accessibility of this game and the prestige of this game. They want this to be played by everyone. They're acting like this is the evolution of games, that all
Yeah, they're
games should be
treating it
like
like
this.
it's like the Godfather of video
And
games.
yeah, and like every like the message is everyone should play this. This is the one. But is that good
So
when this
here's
is
my
the
problem with that. Unless say you're trying to get anybody to play it, if you're just a movie fan and you're jumping into this as one of your first video games, it's inaccessible to anybody who's not like entrenched in the horror genre. You know what I mean?
Fair, or
So it's kind
at
of
least
like,
at least as like a, or at least yeah, you're right.
I mean, no, go ahead. I mean,
No, I was gonna say, like, I guess there's some people who really like action movies and are and
but
have
not
a.
all. But action movies, those things happen so quick
I was gonna say
that
it's
you
more like the
don't
Doom
even.
Eternal spectrum.
Yeah, that or it
Yeah,
happens so fast that you don't even really think about it because this game wants you to sit there and
and
think about
Stew.
and stew in the person who's a rando that you just murdered,
Oh my
and
god,
also the random NPCs, very way too on the nose, scream out their randomly generated name in
names.
terror because they're friends.
Yes,
So the
and it makes me think of like the
it
recording
contradicts
studio.
itself.
It makes me think of the record. Like I talked about this in the review. There was one moment. It was actually like in Santa Barbara. It was like one of the Radlers or whatever they were called. Yeah, the
Well,
Radlers.
I felt nothing about those guys. They could have died, no problem.
I know, right? Like the game wanted to know they're all wearing cargo shorts and riot gear and listening to butt rock. You're not
And
supposed to like these
I
guys.
had like I didn't even have that hard a time with the scars, but especially them. Like I really only felt bad about the wolves because
Yeah,
it didn't seem like that they were. But yeah. Anyway,
but anyway,
ethics, semantics, blah blah
whatever.
blah.
The
Feel bad
fact
about
is,
this.
one of these guys charges me, and I panic, and I aim the shotgun. And usually, I go for like the headshot, but I was just like firing it off as soon as I could, and so I hit him in the leg. And I take his leg off,
No.
and he's literally on his back, on his ground, just writhing and like waving his stump at me. And blood is spurting everywhere, and and he's screaming the entire time and like crawling backwards. And I'm like, this is a 30-second death animation. They had to, the person in the studio
Somebody animated it.
and one actor had all the little dots painted on them and stood in the studio, and Neil Druckmann had to be like, okay, and now scoot back on your elbows and wave your knee in the air screaming. Excellent. And and it's, I mean, thematically it's, I don't know. And what's weird is that mechanically it's
Who knows how many
fun.
versions of that there are in the game?
Yeah, how many takes? I know, and and how many voices they had to do because they have like all the different background people. But anyways, I feel like I'm gonna give weapon combat a contradiction if you agree, because mechanically it's very very fun, and yet thematically it feels so opposed to like everything the game's trying to do.
Okay, so what I was gonna mention was it feels like that the game's themes are, because I was talking about the games that try to be pacifistic, and we try to allude that to this game, but I think this game is more just kind of like an action movie, John Wick style, like revenge will consume you and
Yeah.
make you hollow in your heart, and it
Yes.
will destroy everything that you ever held dear, and that's exactly what it did for both Ellie and Abby. So if you're considering that that's the thesis of the game, which that's what I interpret the thesis to be, it sort of works. But because the player is supposed to directly empathize, we'll just say with Ellie specifically, because by the time we get to Abby, we're kind of like more absorbed in the plot. But with Ellie, we're absorbed in our emotional state. And I get it. We liked Joel, but Joel, whatever. I had qualms with Joel the second that first game ended. Right?
Oh, for sure.
I think he deserved to be. I knew that was going to catch up to him eventually. So anyway, long way of saying I stopped empathizing with Ellie. And
You know what?
I started to see myself as the cinematographer of the story because I didn't agree with the decisions that she was making for most of the story.
It's weird because I don't know if this is a credit to the game or a flaw. I haven't decided yet because, like, you're right. When you start the game, I was so viscerally in Ellie's experience. I was like, I hate this woman. I hate these people. Like,
I didn't. I had no idea who they were, but I was like,
I didn't
clearly like relations to the ex Fireflies. To what extent we don't know.
I predicted that from a mile away, and I didn't feel bad for Joel. at all. Like I'm like,
Yeah, you
he
feel
had it
bad
coming.
for Ellie, but
That's what it is. That's what it is. I felt bad for her pain. And I was trying to think,
yeah,
if I saw my father get beaten and tortured to death in front of me, like it wasn't that they just like shot him. Like if they just like shot him and walked away, I would have been like, yeah, Ellie, okay, yeah, that sucks. But like it was, and Naughty Dog does this. It's that visceral experience of you're pinned down and you're watching them just beat the crap out of him. And so I get it. But then by the end of the game, I was on Team Abby.
yeah,
Like
I was too, because
I
Ellie, I actually thought that
I thought Abby was the. I mean, like it's contrived and it's fast paced when she decides to be a better person. But the fact that she does it and she's more committed to doing better. Whereas Ellie's whole thing is I need to do what will make me feel not crappy, and she has to go through the whole game to realize that nothing will make her not crappy.
It's
Like,
really hard because grieving is such a difficult
yeah,
thing for any
and it's
story
very
to tackle
it's very
accurately,
individual.
let alone a video game. But and the way that the late game handles Ellie's PTSD, I empathize with her so much more in those last couple of hours than I did the front half of the game.
Really, I'm the opposite.
Oh,
But
really?
We'll get to Santa Barbara.
So yeah, we'll get to Santa Barbara. I'm not saying that Ellie made all the wrong decisions. It's more that I was empathizing with the characterization of her PTSD.
Got it. Okay, that's fair. That's a fair interpretation.
So, anyway, we'll get to that. Do we want to go to level design just because that's next on the list, or do we want to something else?
No, I feel like we've been meandering. We'll return to the endings. I feel like that.
Yeah,
I feel like we'll
get to the ending. So
yeah, just by the end. And again, I don't know if this was intended. I agree with you that I feel like I was losing my connection to Ellie and her plight and her sympathy.
Yeah,
especially for the last battle. I felt like I was doing it to see the end of the story, and I was not enjoying any second of it.
We'll get to
that.
Go. We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
We'll talk about that.
Do you agree with calling the weapons combat a contradiction?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go to level design.
Because while they are good as a video game, they contradict the
thematically
the feel bad about violence aspect.
Yes,
but they do allow you to kind of become caught up in the frenzy of vengeance, I suppose. But that's kind of a stretch.
Yes, it's interesting because it feels like the game has like wiggle room for like devil's advocates and like, well, I can see why. Like, there's a lot of
that they made it that way.
I know
they want that conversation,
and I talked about that a lot,
making it more important.
Yes, and I talked about that a lot in my review, where it's like, okay, there's that does like ambiguity sort of equate to prestige and complex? Does ambiguity equate to complexity? Yes or no? Or yeah. And they would say yes. I would say not always.
Depends on who made it.
Exactly. So let's move on, because let's move on to level design, because I want to be positive, and I would say that this is the one thing where I am like all positive, love everything about it.
Yeah.
There are some sections that aren't as good. It's not like 100% the whole way through. There are some levels that are weaker than others, but I think overall it's gorgeous walking through this game.
Yeah. Yeah. Visually, absolutely stunning. Every time there was rain or dripping water or like individually moving leaves, Dylan and I were like, wow.
Like the choice of Seattle specifically, and like it being just so lush and green with like water being a huge part of it is 10 out of 10 great choices.
Go-to city to be overgrown.
And one thing, like thematically, I talked about this in the review, is that like it's dangerous everywhere you go, but there's also a beauty, and I think that's sort of something they go with the characters too, is that like everyone has sort of like a light in them, but also this capacity for darkness. So I think thematically it works. I think mechanically it works. Also, something I didn't notice until New Game Plus, and this is kind of corny, maybe on the nose now that I thought about it, but the whole like the imagery of the moth, like, you know, Ellie's like tattoo and the thing on the guitar and like the loading screen, It's all about like those about finding the light. They gravitate towards the light in the
Oh,
dark.
didn't even pick up on that.
I didn't pick it up until the replay. And also, I picked up on this on the replay, is that it's very subtle, but the game, I mean, obviously it's not subtle when you hit the hint button, but the levels are designed so that you know where to go because it has more natural lighting. You're instantly drawn to
Yeah.
the light.
Oh,
You're
wow.
drawn to the
Okay.
light as you navigate all the levels. You go towards the light, literally.
So
Like when,
I didn't catch any of that. So here's something that ties back to pacing is I feel like I missed stuff because
oh,
I was
definitely.
playing the game like most other games. Like like that kind of effect of when you are playing like God of War or Final Fantasy VII Remake does this, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
When you start on a map or you're supposed to be going in a certain direction,
You go the
you
opposite.
instinctually go the
Yeah.
opposite direction
Yeah,
to
for
find
sure.
shit that you might need.
Yes,
And
you gotta pop those pills, baby. That's how you're better at
every
headshots.
time I tried to do that, the game basically said, "Nope, here's a wall. Fuck you." And it felt like it kind of ruined my natural pace of meandering through the levels. But I also feel like I missed rooms. Like I didn't get a lot of the safes because I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't find the location for the combination. And like again, because I had a viewer with me, I was kind of like trying to keep it a little brisk in terms of
Mm-hmm.
movement through different set pieces. But also, like I missed stuff like when she sits down with the guitar that they find in one location and she plays
Oh yeah.
"Aha." I saw that
Mm-hmm.
on YouTube like 2 weeks later, and I was like, "What was this? Did I miss
Yeah.
this?" And I wonder like how much stuff I actually missed otherwise.
I think yeah, and that's interesting because when I was playing it, especially the Ellie chapters before the switch to Abby, I was playing it very slow. I was creeping by. I was crouching,
Mm-hmm.
using the listen mode, whatever. Literally every corner, looking for everything. And I found a lot of those walls where I'm like, okay, I can't go here. But I found most of the stuff on my first playthrough, and I think so I think the pace is and the design is sort of what you make of it. If you're willing to slow down and check everything, you will find it. But if you're kind of moving fast, or if you just kind of want to see what's next, it is very easy to miss. I will say that because they're so committed. And I think the whole game it kind of suffers that same thing like Red Dead Redemption 2 did, where it's that commitment to the realism.
Yeah,
That like if
commitment to
you're
making you sit through
walking,
a really long
oh
animation.
my god, oh my god, and
It's
if you're
not
walking,
as bad as Red Dead Redemption 2.
no,
I
no,
will
no, no.
say that much.
but but the idea where you could like if you're walking through the apocalypse and you're walking by an apartment building, how would you realistically know which room has good stuff in it and which room is accessible? You wouldn't. Neither does Ellie until you
I
check
mean,
every single one.
she certainly is pretty ingenious with the way that she comes up with different stuff. So I only have I'm just going to start with the negative stuff so we can get to the positive stuff. But I wanted
Sure.
to get a couple of the negative gripes off my chest in terms of the level design.
Okay.
One, there aren't too many glitches in the game, but the glitch that drove me crazy was on multiple occasions opening drawers or trying to pick up an item and the game either didn't acknowledge the item until the prompt just kind of stopped working,
Mm-hmm.
and also there were times where I picked up an item and I immediately go into my backpack and craft a health item or something like that, and that item isn't counted in my backpack.
Interesting. I didn't have that.
I'm playing it on Destiny PlayStation 4, so
Okay.
maybe I'm being judged. I don't know if you have a PS4 Pro. I don't know if performance is an issue, but like
We do. So maybe that didn't
you have a
register.
Pro.
Yeah. I did not. We did not have that issue. All right.
Yeah, that's
What
like
would happen is sometimes you open a drawer. And I think this is intentional. You open a drawer and there's nothing in there.
I think no. Okay, so that's on purpose because
That's
the
on
game
purpose.
has the specific accessibility thing where you can boost the amount of crafting material that
But
pops up
but see, here's the thing: is I did that, and that
all
still
the way up.
happens all the way up.
Really?
This is what that changes. This is what that change. I because I was really pissed. I was like, okay, I have resource scarcity, nothing. All the resources, give them to me, baby. And I
Okay.
thought every drawer I'd open, I'd find something. And no, what resource scarcity does? Here's what it actually changes.
Please
It
tell me.
doesn't change the amount of times you find something like I thought it did. What it changes is that when you find like a rag, it's actually like a quarter of a rag.
What?
You know, like when you walk up to an item and like it's like part of the wheel. It's like 50%, 10% rag, 50% rag, or 100% rag.
No.
You know, no. Okay,
No.
so maybe this is what you mean by you're not registering it being in your thing. When you
Are you
pick up
telling me that I'm only picking up like small amounts of
yes,
rag? And
yes,
that's
every time
why I can't craft a health item?
yes, okay. So you
That
missed
was
that
never
prompt.
yeah, I guess I
It
missed
pops
that
up.
prompt.
It pops up once. The first time you pick up a chunk of rag, it tells you. Um, it tells
I
you
must have been
you
in a
find.
conversation or something. I
It says,
totally missed that.
yeah,
I
Dina's
was
like
so frustrated. So I
Dina
guess
is
I
blabbing
was
to you.
blaming the game.
Okay, yes. So this is the thing. When you find like a rag, you won't find a full rag. You'll, or sometimes you do. You'll find a quarter of a rag, and it's only when you have a full wheel of rag does it count as one rag, of which you can hold three.
But you need to be able to
You
pick up
need.
multiple wheels.
I know. I know. So you need to
So
actually.
world
To
building
really.
context makes sense. Mechanically very annoying.
Yes, mechanically annoying. And so what happens if you turn up resource scared or you turn down resource scarcity, instead of picking up quarter rag, you'll pick up 75% rag or 100% rag each time.
My God, now I feel better. I thought I was going crazy.
No, you're right. So yeah, if you pick up a rag and it still counts as 0 rag, it's because you're technically at 1/2 rag. And it only counts as 1 rag once you go past 100% rag.
Fine,
Which again
but
is sort of
still a
weirdly
dumb
conveyed.
decision. But I mean, okay, so that's what adjusting your resource scarcity means.
Yes, which I was a little disappointed. I thought it meant more instances of resources. It means each time you find resources, there are more of them.
So that means that when you adjust that, it adjusts the quantity of the item on the back end instead of populating more items into the world.
Yes. Yes, that is exactly what that
Okay,
means.
that's
So
probably why they did that because I don't remember the first game doing that.
I don't remember that either. So like, yeah, if you have
Because
resource scarcity,
it's literally just changing the statistical value of the
yep,
material that you
you
pick up.
you won't find more instances of bullets being dropped. But if you find a bullet that's dropped, or like you find a gun, if you have resource scarcity, you'll find 1 bullet. If you have resource scarcity turned off, you'll find 4 bullets in that one instance. That's what it changes.
That okay,
Which
okay.
it doesn't. Which is the one thing it doesn't really tell you. It just says
So
resource scarcity.
what we've come to the conclusion of on both instances of opening the drawers and finding nothing, which you found frustrating, and
Uh-huh.
me picking up an item and being frustrated that it didn't count as a complete item, is they want you to be annoyed that you're not finding items
Yes,
enough
that was the one
because
thing
it's
that
very
bothered me.
deliberate in the world building.
It's deliberate. Like they want you to feel the disappointment of maybe there's something. Da 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 da. Nothing.
And I'm sure Ellie and Abby feel exactly the same way. In the instance, I get it. It's a part of the role playing. As a video game, it doesn't work.
That's what I. Again, it's like I said this. This is one of the reasons why I really like Doom Eternal is that it makes a lot of concessions as far as like taking you out of the narrative but enhancing the gameplay. Because I feel like yes, it enhances the realism to have drawers that leads you to nothing.
Yeah.
But as a gameplay mechanic, it is frustrating. Okay, I'll
Okay.
concede that about the
So
level design.
the reason. So what I was going to allude to in tandem with that or following that, but I'm glad that we gave that its due because we actually came to the conclusion of a certain problem and what its value is.
But
But
I'll say that's the one problem for me.
okay, I have a couple more problems.
Okay, let's go through that then.
So that was the first, and in addition to that, I felt like the first game did a better job at segmenting the difference between your combat time
Mm-hmm.
and your item hunting time because the locations were kind of different. And
True.
it feels like because of this game having more open-ended maps,
Yeah.
and it's not that the maps other than that initial Seattle area where when you have the horse, the maps are linear but they're dense, and that's
Yes.
great for finding detail. But when you're scavenging, it's all about like what is the cost of spending your weapons and items to destroy clickers and wolf enemies that randomly come in so that you can go into a coffee shop and find these items.
Yeah.
And it feels like that they're trying to make you decide between this trade-off, but
Yes.
instead I feel like I'm obligated to waste my trinkets to go find more trinkets.
True. True. Yeah, I agree. Because
Now,
basically every.
sometimes it helps because it gives me an actually valuable thing, like when I find the pills or
Yeah.
the gear upgrade pieces. But when we're finding half of pieces of cloth, it really feels like a bummer in terms
Mhm.
of like the gameplay value, even though
Yeah,
it
like
makes sense
why?
thematically.
Why did I? Yeah, why did I spend 6 bullets to only pick up 3?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
get it. Like if you're in the apocalypse, it makes sense that you might take that risk because you might
Hmm.
find something, and
Right.
you get like gameplay flavors, like of like finding letters or like somebody's
Hmm.
like lost stuff, or I don't know. It just didn't. It felt like it could have used a little more balancing work, so it didn't
Hmm.
feel so. I
I
don't know.
didn't have I saw that, and it's funny, I experienced that more in New Game Plus because now that I have all the weapons upgraded and I have all the pill upgrades like complete, there's less of an incentive to complete every experience and scour for resources because all I will find is ammo and crafting materials, which I will then use to spend on the next encounter. Or if I just run past the encounter, I also have all my resources anyway.
Yeah,
I will say that for my initial gameplay, to me, it was always worth it to at least find like to go through and spend my ammunition and my melee charges and whatever because I was a pill fiend in this game.
yeah,
I
no, and when it was possible, so was I.
so
Because having those skills are really good.
yeah, I know. So to me, that trade off was always worth it. Maybe that I don't know what that says, or if the game's like, ooh, violence. But I went through every combat encounter, clearing out literally every single enemy because
Well,
I
and
wanted to find
that's the
everything.
other thing is like where the game might encourage you maybe to sneak through and not kill everybody. The
Well,
game
I think
encourages you to kill everybody so you can go look for those items.
Well, see, I think that's the trade-off. It's either you go through an encounter and you pass by all of it to conserve your resources, or you spend your resources and then you're compensated with a couple more resources to refill your stocks.
Yeah.
That's
And
what I think is the trade-off.
I think in the Abbey run you get rewarded for that a little more
Yeah,
because the sequences are more linear.
I think. Yeah, and I think again, her combat style it suits guns blazing, which only works if you have more resources in general.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like yeah.
That said, since we just talked about Abby and we're on level design, do you
Mm-hmm.
agree that the set pieces
Mm-hmm.
in Abby's chapters are better?
Oof. Um.
Because that's what I think.
Really, I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of people saying that I thought you were gonna ask me if you thought they were worse because a lot of people are saying they're worse because I feel like
I'm
it's more
curious why
linear
they might have thought they were worse.
because it's more linear. I will say that I think my favorite, and just because maybe it's recency bias because I'm doing New Game Plus, but I really liked the open world segment as Ellie when you first get to Seattle and you're checking off boxes in a map.
It's
And
yes, that is cool, but you're only doing it for like half a
that,
day,
and
and
I'm really upset that they
it's a circular fetch quest to get
yeah.
gasoline.
Yeah, the narrative reason why you're doing it is kind of lackluster. However, I think one of the disservices the game does is that it opens with that basically. And so I thought, oh, this is what this game is like. This is so different from the first one. This game is way more open.
I
And I
knew
was
what
getting
it was doing because Uncharted: The Lost Legacy did it.
I know it had that one thing with the car when you're driving around
Yeah,
Africa. And I'm
it's
like,
the
and
same.
I the entire
Oh,
time at
wait,
the back of my
Uncharted
mind,
4 did it also, where it's like you
yes,
have a temporarily open
you have the
map.
car. Yeah, you have the novel open
Yeah,
world
so
area.
both of the last two Uncharted games did that. Look, this is what
Yeah.
Naughty Dog has to do. They have to find ways to
I
incorporate
know.
cars into their brands.
I know. And so but so I was going through that. I'm like, okay, either this is the Uncharted thing and it's the one level this happens, or maybe the entire world is like this and it's open and I'm have to navigate the entire thing. No, so I was
So the reason I felt that way,
so okay. Here's my question to you:
yeah,
is okay, maybe let's open with this. What's your favorite set piece or level, and why do you think Abby's are better than Ellie's? Because my favorite are still Ellie's Day One, but in Day One in Seattle, but I do enjoy Abby's almost equivalently.
I think that Abby's probably best day, let's call it, is it day two where Lev's sister has the arm that needs to be amputated, and they go up the
Yes.
tower, across the
Yes.
tower, deal with
Mm-hmm.
her vertigo, climb back
Right.
down the tower after they've fallen, and
Mm-hmm.
you need to get your way through the infected zone, and then you end up in the hospital, and then you have to get into the ground zero from Outbreak Day, and you fight um, uh,
The
the
Rat
Rat
King.
King. I
Right.
think that entire extended chapter there of Abby's Day 2 in Seattle is the best that the game has to offer in terms of variety of gameplay,
Mm-hmm.
thematics being intertwined with the gameplay, finding a really cool new item in the flamethrower, and revealing new enemy types, and I don't know. It felt like a really damn good set piece, and I wish they were able to do stuff like that. And I liked Ellie's stuff, but it felt like you were kind of going into different suburbs,
Mm-hmm.
and because you were going into different houses, taking out wolves, going into the basement, taking out clickers, coming back out and around, and you were finding different exits. And I felt like that the closest thing for Ellie was um, the probably Seattle Day One, because you have that open map
Mm-hmm.
comparatively, and it's very strange how they're the same game yet they feel really different.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair. Um, I don't know. I liked Ellie's because they felt more open. Like I do agree that you get a lot of variety with like that particular one. Like you have, walking over like the rafters, like over the
Oh my
bridge
god, it
they
was
call it.
so good.
That was really
Nailed
good.
it.
And obviously, going through like the hotel with all the like when you get the flamethrower, that was really like creepy. And then like, obviously everything subterranean was good too. I
Even just
will
like
say,
the front half of it, where you're quietly kind of like making your way up, and you're going into these different apartments, and it's like
yeah, I
you
will
get a
say
lot of that in the game. But I felt like those were even some of the best apartments that you got to kind of
it's
explore.
and maybe it's just like an aesthetic thing, but I feel like that was very much just while it looked cool and it was still all hallway after hallway after hallway. Whereas I liked Ellie's much more open and like crawling in the grass. Like I think one of my favorites is like the first time you meet the Seraphites and you get like hit with that arrow out of nowhere, and you have like the really tall grass and there's all the
Mm.
trees. And like I loved the map where you have the boat and like there's that one encounter.
Oh
There's
yeah,
like the
those are some of Ellie's best stuff.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I like the wide open because I've the wide open battle terrains because I feel like that gives me more options for the
Hmm.
stealth and kind of picking people around and positioning myself.
I guess maybe I felt the way that I did about Abby's is because you said that they felt like hallway after hallway, and for me it felt different because it actually did feel like I was kind of weaving my way through a maze, because you're exposed to the Seraphites' sense of architecture, like the way that they
Mm-hmm.
build their different ladders and walkways for the first time. It I think it probably just appealed to me because there was such a distinct ebb and flow to its variety of art direction, I guess. Because so it didn't
Mm.
really feel linear to me. It did feel like I was kind of
That's,
going down the
that's
street,
fair.
up the building, across the building, falling down, making my way around.
I
So
mean, yeah, it's hallway after hallway after hallway, but each hallway is different. You have the Seraphite
and half
hallway.
the
You have
hallways are vertical.
yeah, you have the infected hallway, and then you have like the hospital hallway. So
Yeah, and like
that's fair.
yeah, I don't know.
Well,
It's
I think
that part just worked for me.
one thing,
It was
but here's what I'll say, and maybe this is like the pacifistic route here is the fact that we have this disagreement and the fact that both of these levels are in the game, and some of them appeal to me more and the other ones appeal to you more. The fact that the game has both has a little bit of something for everyone. So I still think
Yeah.
the level design overall is a huge success.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Boom.
I don't know. That's just kind of like that for some reason clicked with me, and it's not to say that the Ellie levels are not good. It's to say that the ones that really made an impact on me for some reason were all within that stretch.
Yeah, I will say, I think, okay, I think we're going to move on to set pieces, and we're kind of already here. What
Yeah.
is your, I think you already said it, but what is, like, if you had to say one specific moment, one specific level encounter set piece, what is your favorite and why?
Probably the basement outbreak where you fight the Rat King, just because it feels like the closest that this series has pressed upon like Resident Evil a little bit.
Okay. I say my favorite would be the boat where you get the crossbow.
Yeah.
Oh, that just you get to like, cause
Yeah.
it's so on the cusp of Walking Dead, and then it's like, okay, now you just get to be Daryl Dixon,
Yeah.
and I was like, you know what? I'm here for it. I am that shameless, and yeah, that was, and it was refreshing because Abby is more geared towards the action combat, and that was much more geared towards the stealth. But they gave Abby her like stealth ace in the hole.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so
Yeah,
I really love that.
just
Oh, the
a monster.
crossbow's so good.
It's a great tool.
It's so good. Anyway, so set pieces. Do you think? I think we're saying mechanic. Okay, would you say that's a mechanic or a thematic success? Going with our structure here, because I like
in the
them.
same way that we were talking about the variety of combat between the two characters, it works.
Yeah. All right.
I think it's successful in both characters.
What do you think? Okay, so if we can include set pieces, let's also include like big moments. Like I'm thinking like a set piece is when like the last mission is your Abby and you're on like the Seraphite Island and it's all burning and you're charging out of there.
Yeah.
Do you? I feel like some people dig it. Some people it really took them out of it.
It
I
didn't
liked
take
it.
me out of it. It just kind of felt like an on rail thing.
Yeah, and there's a couple times that Naughty Dog does this where it's like that moment, like when Jesse shows up and you get in the car with him as Ellie, and you have your
Yeah,
pistol
it
out,
just
and
kinda
you just have
happens.
and you just have unlimited ammo
But
because
it's what it is. It turns a car chase scene into an interactive thing. And
yeah,
it kind of keeps the story moving along, makes you kind of traverse the area faster, and it's honestly, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it more, the way that Abby's narrative culminates when they go to the island to find Lev,
hmm,
those were really good. Like when the way that it gradually descends into just complete carnage, but like you kind of start and it's like a little quieter, and you have these different like architectural pieces, and then yeah, it's just burning, and you have those really brutal fist fight scenes, like
yeah,
where like the sickle and she has to like cut the guy's face off. Like that
yeah,
was probably the best one of those melee things that we were complaining about earlier, except for the last one, but that's because that didn't really it kind of hurt.
yeah. I don't know. Okay. I'll concede that it's the best, but at the same time, it's also the
And like
long.
it's saying
It's also the
best is such
long.
an arbitrary.
I guess, but it's also the longest, which means I resent it the most, just because I don't like the melee.
That said, Santa Barbara as in its entirety
Yeah.
felt very cohesive. And I almost count that entire thing when you get to Santa Barbara as Ellie as its
Mhm.
own set piece,
Set piece.
because
I'd agree.
it's such a refreshing environment for the game up to that
I
point.
will say, I feel like Santa Barbara, and we'll get to it also more. To me, it was the one part that felt vestigial, and like I don't think Santa Barbara needed to be in the game. However, just being there visually, I really appreciated the level design again. So for that change in a fully real, like, because like it feels kind of tacked on, and yet for a tacked on mission, because it's so still in depth and fully realized, like it's still impressive to be there. So
Yeah,
I'll give it that.
I think I think it deserved to be there. I know a lot of people kind of called the Santa Barbara epilogue at that point there to be like, oh, this could have been the beginning of a third game. To me, it felt more like, and we can talk about it more in the story, but I'll leave it at it felt like Breaking Bad's finale to me.
You know what? I want to dive into. Okay, so
You want to dive into
move.
that here?
Yeah, let's get into it because I feel like that's probably going to be our biggest disagreement, Evan. Because Santa Barbara really did not work for me. So
Why is that?
Well, first, really quick to resolve this because I like resolution. Set pieces, yes, no, success, fail, contradiction.
I think it was successful.
I agree. Quicktime events, I feel like they're kind of one and the same.
It's the same thing we were talking about with the melee combat. It was either the melee combat or it was like tapping the controller for the flashlight, which is a carryover from the first game.
Yeah.
And then the thing where you're crawling through the walls and there's like a jump scare or whatever because it's loading something else on the other side of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
They're whatever. Tropey.
It's fine. Okay.
QuickTime events are tropey.
Yeah, it's there. Okay. I'm not even giving anything success, fail, anything. It's just there. So
yeah, those are just there.
Let's talk about Santa Barbara because this sounds like it's juicy.
Okay.
It sounds like we disagree here. I personally think that mechanically, it's great. It was fun to play as Abby. Play as Ellie again after being Abby, getting to get a couple more upgrades and all that. I really got to use the bow because I finally got it fully upgraded. And you get like the submachine gun that's silenced. That's fun. And then again, like the level design, the way it looks, Sam was beautiful in the game. It's like I liked all of that. Story wise, I really disagreed with Ellie's decision to go hunt Abby again. I get it. She had her own PTSD. She had stuff she was going.
We alluded to this earlier. Do we want to wind back the clock and start at the beginning of that epilogue where they're at the ranch together?
Sure, because it kind of goes hand in hand. But like I think
that's super important. I think that sets the stage for what this is.
Okay. So then, do you want to start there?
Yeah. So,
this bit with you're with Dina and you have the baby.
Yeah, and not only does Ellie have the issue where when she's trying to do something as simple as go herd the sheep in,
you're right.
The night,
she has her
panic
episode.
attack, and she's haunted by the image of Joel's skull crushed into his face. Tommy shows up, and
you're right.
Missing an eye, and
he got shot in the face.
He got shot in the face. I thought he was dead.
I thought he was dead.
Everybody assumed he was
dead. My favorite theory.
He should have been dead because guess what? The person that is Tommy in this epilogue feels like a different character, and he is incredibly selfish, and he takes advantage of Ellie's emotional state and her trauma. And I get that Joel was his brother, and I get that he sacrificed a lot and probably fucked up his marriage because Ellie was going to go and do something really stupidly rash. But to go and say, we failed and you need to go exact vengeance on my eye.
Yeah.
It felt a little childish to me.
I
blame the events of what transpire on him.
What I totally 100%. I thought I was so convinced this was the end of the game and that because you have that confrontation, right, where like Abby confronts Ellie in the theater and you play as Abby and then you're about to kill Dina and then Lev says don't do it and you don't do it and Abby says I'm going to forgive you. I don't want to see you again. And it was that moment where I was like, I'm Team Abby. She was the bigger person a second time in a row. She spares Ellie in the beginning. And then I'm like, yeah, perfect. And then I thought to me, the game was signaling the fact that Ellie settles down at the ranch with Dina in the first place shows that she forgave Abby, or at least that she was willing to live with the fact that she let her go.
I don't think that's true.
No, clearly it's not because we have Santa Barbara. But
what I say, I mean that I think Ellie only did that because she had Dina. I think if Ellie was acting on her own, or like Tommy was still walking and able, like
she would have kept going.
Probably would have kept up the hunt.
But to me, but I think that's beautiful and is supposed to be the inspiring message. The fact that she gives it up, that she realized. I know,
Inspiring message.
but I'm saying if I was in the writer's room with, Druckmann and I'd be like, listen, to me, I would have believed as the audience, you saying the fact that she's settling down with the ranch is her character growth, is her resolution. I would have believed that. I would have been happy with that. I also believe that she needs to go and do Santa Barbara, but it I feel like she ends up in the same place. Like why does she have to go to Santa Barbara, kill all those people, fight and mess up Abby, and then let her go in order for her to get over her PTSD? How is she
I I
better
think it's a little
now?
more than the PTSD. I think that she harbors a lot of resentment. I think that she wasn't completely over it, but was trying to convince herself to be over it. And I
I
think that she was kind of a meandering sense of identity in that period of time, even though it
and
was a happy
again
life on
and
that
again
ranch with
I
with Dina.
and I understand that, and I understand that I understand. I believe that she needed to go do this to resolve that part of her. I'm saying I would have believed that she had gone through that she needed to do that in order to have the ranch with Dina in the first place. I would have believed that, and I would have been happy with that. And that is why I think Santa Barbara is pointless, and the ending lacks more of a punch to me.
I
Because
think it
I would
works
have believed,
because it single-handedly takes the story and makes it a holistic tragedy.
yeah, but tragedy's sad.
Tragedy is sad, and we are living in sad times. But you know, man,
But like
I
I feel like, and I don't know, like the game tries to have a cake and eat it too, right? Because like at the end, Abby is let go and she gets to Catalina, as far as we know, because the start screen is
yep,
different, and that's actually Catalina. That is a building in Catalina. Abby gets there. What happens when she gets there, we don't know.
the
It's
fucking
ambiguous,
Catalina
but
wine mixer.
I know. And
Sorry,
and
it's
it's
the
ambiguous
fucking
what happens to
Catalina wine
Ellie.
mixer.
It's Jesus Christ.
Sorry.
It's ambiguous what happens to Ellie. She's probably gonna go and try to get Dina back. But so I feel like it ends like where those characters are with Ellie trying to live with what she's done and Abby trying to seek out the Fireflies and Catalina. I feel like that's where the characters were before Santa Barbara. Abby's trying to get to the Fireflies. Ellie's trying to live with what she's done.
Well,
It's just you had to go through more
I think,
to get
like I was
bait.
alluding to before, the whole thesis of like an addiction to like vengeance and the draining the circle on negativity, and feeling like that she had to live or had to like make do for Joel's legacy and his memory, and or repair her memory of him. um I think that what the game does by the time that she leaves, goes to Santa Barbara, fails yet again, and comes back is that we see just what kind of effect that journey before made on her, in a negative way. And also in that final moment, not only does she, as she's trying to kill Abby once and for all, truly become worse of a person than Joel ever was,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, she also does repair her memory of him, because there's the literal visual cue
That
where
yeah.
it's not cutting to where she's remembering him dying before her eyes. It's the last time that they had a positive moment together. And that, I think, not only did I like that she just destroyed a bunch of slavers, um, but even though it took a lot and it cost a lot to get there, the emotional payoff of Ellie allowing Joel to finally rest in her memory, um, was a really seamless conduit to the seeing their final conversation together and showing the consequence of uh, what she sacrificed for such a for basically like holding on to the past, and then she just doesn't have her life with Dina anymore. Actually, there's actually a fan theory that she goes back to the ranch after meeting up with Dina in Jackson, but I don't completely buy it.
No, neither do I.
The reason for that I saw was that there's a bracelet that she has from Dina, but she
Right.
doesn't have it for the whole game, and she has it when she goes back. But I think it's probably more that she goes back to that ranch, sees Dina is gone, Dina left her stuff, she's gonna bring the guitar with her, which she can't play anymore because she lost her fingers, um,
Hmm.
and she leaves without it. She leaves without any of her stuff, and she has to start fresh. And I think that that is a much more interesting place to leave whatever potential next story there could be, is that Ellie has to basically do what Joel did to himself by murdering the Fireflies, which is basically trying to start with a clean slate, having done so many terrible things. So that's why I like that ending.
I think that's valid, and I agree that's good.
It's okay if you
I
disagree. That's why I like that ending, though.
No, I get it. I get it. I do, and I see the merit in the ending as it is. I just personally think I would have bought if she had ended in the farm, and maybe it's gushy and maybe it's like it defeats the purpose of the game or whatever. But like I could have seen her like I could have seen her becoming a parent and having the baby as her clean slate.
It could have
In the
been her
same
clean slate, but did she deserve that clean slate after what she put Dina through?
It's a good question. It is, but again, like the game is sort of like people like what people deserve. People don't get what they deserve. Like people just get. It's like you get what you make of it.
Yeah, and I get it. It's a little clunky
It's
how it
I
gets
think
there.
it's
I think
no,
the
and I
game
think it's just
needed
I think
to,
it's
like,
just I think it's just subjective.
Yeah.
Again, I think I was also just trying to finish the dang thing.
yeah,
And I was
that's it.
and the fact that like I thought like okay, this is beautiful, this is a nice little moment with the baby, it's idyllic, it's the light at the end of the tunnel, this whole light imagery thing, here it is, and here's one more 5-hour mission. Like there's probably
5 hours.
Santa Barbara took a while. It's like a good 3 to 5 hours.
Was it really? It went by in a flash. I thought it was like 2 hours.
I finished it in the setting, but like I clocked it. I think it's like 4 hours.
You know
but
what
like
else I think works about it is that I think it's interesting in that it puts Abby in a situation where she needs to start over from scratch too, because she goes there looking for the Fireflies, and she ends up getting conned, and she can't trust anyone anymore. And she really
like
she
but I
had
feel like
Owen's
she
little
was
nugget of
there.
wanting to go there. She had Owen's nugget of wanting to go there, and just like how Ellie was for Joel, it parallels that, where that's her memory of Owen is going to Santa Barbara and finding the Fireflies. And when she gets there, she gets completely fucked over by somebody pretending to be them.
To say that that didn't happen in Catalina. I just like I just feel like the conclude again. It's and I like I said I like the ending is fine. I like your interpretation of it. I like it more after having you explain that. I just believe that if you had to like break down like simple like summarize bullet points of where they are emotionally at the end of the story, I believe that they were
basically dead.
They were, yeah, I know, but like,
even.
but they were more or less at the same place as they were before Santa Barbara starts, with Abby being hopeful and seeking out the remainder of the Fireflies, and Ellie dealing with trying to come to terms with what she's done.
So yes,
Where they
right.
are,
So
they are, like the specifics are different, and I think that's sort of what makes or break it.
Yeah,
but I feel like
fundamentally,
the
very specific thing that makes the beginning of the Santa Barbara arc, that epilogue, and the end of it distinctive, is that both Ellie and Abby come out the other side completely hopeless and longing for a sense of any kind of identity to themselves.
Yeah, that's fair. But like I said, I think it's if it's not the same exact place, it's very similar, and so that's why I feel like we didn't need 5 more hours of slogging through deaths and hyper violence in order to get to almost the same place. as they
Yeah,
were.
I get that.
That's my big problem with Santa
But
Barbara
killing
is that
those slavers and rapists with a silenced submachine gun was
it still felt good.
it was literally I felt like Walter White with the giant machine gun coming out of
I
the
guess the
trunk of his car
Nazis, yeah.
killing the Nazis.
That's
That's what that
fair.
whole sequence felt like to me. And that
But
alone
also
would have been worth it. I would have been fine if Ellie ended up finding Abby on that post, cutting
see
her down and deciding she made the wrong decision and let her go. I thought they
here
were going
was
to do
yeah
that.
here was I and like I also was having other thoughts of how it could have been a little bit better in my mind. One, I thought that yeah, Ellie would get taken over and that she and basically Abby would have to team up to get out. And then they'd be like, you know what?
Oh, that would have been cool.
Like stuff like and it would because like they kind of hinted at and again I picked this up in New Game Plus that there's other militias like they reference another group called the Ravens who are like in New Mexico and so like wherever you go you're gonna find these groups and they're bad to you but they're also just people and like I feel like they'd kind of realize oh these guys are like the Seraphites or oh these guys are like the wolves and so really we need to we looked at each other as enemies but really we're all just people and we'll go our separate ways and we're stronger for doing that. I would have liked that more. Here's my other thing. Talk about ludonarrative distance. Let's talk about that last fight with Abby. I would have liked it a lot more if like the fight starts and you can choose to not push anything and you as the player let Abby go.
Well, but that's counter to anything that's Naughty Dog. I thought you were going to say choose your fighter,
Well,
which is
well, actually,
wait,
that'd be
hold
cool
on.
too.
Have you played Nier Automata?
I have not. That's on my to-do list.
Okay, it's really hard. I don't want to ruin it for you.
It's. I mean, it's okay. It's like a 5 hour game. I've heard there's like seven endings. I know.
Dude. Okay, so my friend Quinn is going through.
Is there
the
is there
proper
is there
ending of
is
it
there a
right now.
choose your character at the end?
At the end of playthrough 3? There's
Okay.
ending C, and then there's ending D. At the end of ending D, you get ending E, and ending E is the proper ending. But basically, you culminate playthrough 3 with a bunch of talky talk revelations, and you get a boss battle, and your two main characters, and they fight.
Mm-hmm.
Choose one, and their gameplay style is super fundamentally different. Where one is overpowered hack and slash, and the other is strategic hacking.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a conflicting in ideology, and so that's the weird thing about Ellie and Abby. And I've heard other people say you should have been able to choose, but
Mm-hmm.
Ellie and Abby, like we were saying, are kind of the same person. The only difference is
Yeah.
we, the player, know that, and they don't know that about each other, which is really tragic. And I think allowing a choice takes it away from being a Naughty Dog game because they're
Yeah.
they're telling you a movie basically because
I know.
that's
Well,
what
see,
they
but
do.
here's my point is that you want to talk about like ludonarrative and using gameplay as the medium to tell the story. I think it could have been a profoundly powerful moment for you as because we talked about like how we start disagreeing with what Ellie is doing. I think if we had that moment to take agency and be like, no, Ellie should not do this. I refuse to push square and stab Abby. Instead, you have to mash and brutalize Abby to get to the point where Ellie decides, no, I'm gonna let her go. A lot of people are like, oh, you should have killed her, you should have killed her, she should have killed her. And maybe like give the player the choice. I think it could have been more powerful if you as the player decide to let Abby go. And because of that, Ellie decides.
I agree with you fundamentally in that way because I think it speaks to the fact that Naughty Dog did their job in allowing or putting us in a position where our past main character that we adore just because he was our main character and he made a big decision and he's charismatic, Troy Baker, yada yada yada. The girl that killed him, we're forced to play as for half the game, and by the time we get to that, most normal empathetic people are going to not want to kill Abby in the
Yeah.
same way that we didn't want to kill Ellie when we were playing the end of Abby's run.
Right.
So Naughty Dog, as far as the thesis goes, did their job. They made us care and empathize with somebody who murdered a beloved one of our current main character, but then forces us to beat the
So,
living hell out of them until they're
yeah,
almost dead. So, does that actually work? Right. Does the
yeah.
ending even work? Because it seems like most people disconnect from it either because they don't like the decision that Ellie is making, or they don't think that she should have been there at all, or they just don't want to kill Abby.
Sorry, I'm getting texts that someone's hungry.
Oh,
we're
that's
we're
okay.
going on for 2 hours. Um, but this is really good, and yeah, I do think that Naughty Dog did its job. I like um the final fight. Okay, I just think that
They like that we're having this conversation. This is
they
what they
do.
were after.
This is what they're
So
after, and I really like that you let Abby go, because I would have been mad if then I had to watch as Abby shanks. I mean, I watch as Ellie shanks Abby to death. My thing is that that feels like a cinematic, like that's like the ending of a movie, right? Where like the main characters pummeling each other. I think if we're trying to move games forward as a medium, if we're trying to evolve games, it is
mhm.
a decision as the playing person playing the game to not fight. What I wanted to do also is like with Abby fighting Ellie, I didn't want to punch her. I wanted to let her run away, and like I thought,
I think you've almost pressed on it. I think that the actual truth of the thing is that if this were a film, then the genuine ending would have been Ellie cutting her down and then letting her go, because we're not directly
yeah,
involved in the creation of whatever is happening. But because it's inherently a video game, like we said, Sony published,
yeah,
AAA, mature rated, blood and gore, it has to end in a fist fight. I
I
think that the
know.
reason they put that fist fight in there is because it's a video game.
I
And I think
agree.
that's the problem.
I think, but again, I think you could have had an interesting commentary on games. It's like, here's your final boss. This is what you want, right? And I think it would have been powerful to let the player decide, no, this is not what I want. And I think it would have been strong if you had stood there and you had not swung anything. And if time had gone on and Abby's kind of staring at you like, what are you going to do? And then if you do nothing, and then the game kind of moves forward and says that now you're letting her go.
And it's been done in games before, in Undertale.
Exactly. It
And
other
there
games have
is
done
a
it.
moment in Nier Automata that is not the thing that I already told you.
Yeah, you can choose to not do anything, and the act of like not, which is weird, not playing the game, but like, yeah, no, I think that would have been to me
Yeah.
the
It
ending would
would
have
have
worked a
been.
lot harder if
Yeah.
I chose, you know what, Ellie should not engage in this final fight.
You know what would have been even more interesting is if the game deliberately encouraged you to not do that. Like, say that you were put in that exact scenario that we experienced, where it frames you as though you're going to be in a fist fight, and
Mhm.
anytime you try to engage the fist fight, you lose. There's no way
Yeah,
to win. And so the only way to see the ending is to not fight. That is how Naughty Dog could have actually taken that idea that you just expressed there and actually done something that turns out to be towards its thesis
I think
instead.
I agree. I think a lot of people would have hated it. I know there's a lot of people, and this says a lot about them. I'm saying I agree with them, but they wanted to kill Abby at the end, even after playing as her the entire time. Like, why did, or like, or
Then
at
they
least
didn't.
thought that.
Then they didn't get the point.
I know, but I'm just saying
And it's
they would
like
have had a
going and
backlash on their
seeing
hand.
Parasite,
I
and
think,
it's like the same difference as spoilers for Parasite, which won the Oscars for everything, by the way.
go see it. Really good.
Yeah, with Parasite, those are the same people that would go and see that movie and go, I don't get why he killed Mr. Park. He didn't
Yeah,
like the way that he smelled. It's like, no, you fucking idiot.
I
It's the same thing. It's people that it, and this is the problem that we're going to get to in video games, is that people want a no holds barred, no strings attached power fantasy in their video games. And when people are trying to use something, especially with as big a budget and high profile a sequel as this, and use it to tell an artistic story and actually like convey theme and empathy and characterization, you need to strip away some of that power fantasy. So I
Hmm.
think that, and Tim Rogers in his same video did this, and I don't want to go and like steal all my talking points from him, but I thought that this was a very important thing, is that Last of Us isn't just the player playing a game; it's the player role playing.
Yeah.
So when like we've touched on this, when you're Ellie, you're playing like Ellie would survive. And if you're
Yes.
playing like Abby, you're playing
And
like
I
Abby would survive.
and I
And
mentioned that in my review too, which is something I really appreciated. That it draws you in, it fully immerses you.
it does. If a game like this does its job the right way, it puts you in a circumstance of not doing the ludonarrative dissonance thing, but by
Hmm.
succeeding at not inducing that, you're allowing yourself to put yourself in the shoes of the character that you're playing as, so that the things that you're naturally doing
Hmm.
are what the character would do. And it's not specifically like, oh, go hog wild with all your weapons. It's subtle things like you alluded to with the environment, like the natural lighting, the weapons that you are given at that exact point in time, a small piece of dialogue or like body language from the character. I love you too, Dill. He says I love you. I don't know
Okay.
why. So you know what I mean? It's like the same way that a filmmaker uses all the bag of tricks to kind of persuade a viewer of how to feel.
Hmm.
A video game should be able to do that too. But because it's a video game and the player is the person in control, they can totally ruin their own immersion by
Yes.
nature of it being the medium that it is, which is this game comes really, really close, which is why we've been talking about it for 2 hours.
Here's my idea, and maybe this is, um, this has its own issues as like, and I'm sure you'll know it as soon as I say it. I wonder if you should have been given the choice to kill Abby. I wouldn't have taken it, as I would
I
have said. And I think the true ending is choosing not to take it. But I think if the game could have had its moment where it's like, okay, you kill Abby, and congratulations, you're a shithead, and this is what you think people should do. Congratulations, you're a shithead.
I
And
think that opens too much of a can of worms. If this was a game from another publisher, that might have
mm,
worked. But because it's Naughty Dog and Naughty Dog's never done that, and because they are basically like, we are the cinematic game studio from Uncharted onward, um, well, besides Crash Bandicoot, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of like
and
it
Jack and
opens.
Daxter.
Yeah, it opens a can of worms of, are we gonna get Crash and are we gonna get Jack and Daxter in the
But
Uncharted universe? Are we gonna get Nathan Drake? Like, because like when you anyway, my point is, when you introduce a choice in something that has such specific tone and characterization, it kind of messes up the point. I guess is what I'm saying.
I I would disagree because I think the whole thesis is to make that choice at any point. It's not too late to turn towards the light. I think I think choice is a big part of it. Like Ellie chooses to go to Santa Barbara. She could have not. Ellie chooses to let Abby go, and she could have just let her hang and die. But then she chooses to engage in that final fight. And I think,
You sold me.
yeah,
I think if Naughty Dog was gonna do it the Naughty Dog way, and they were really gonna stick to their guns and not do just like a brutal fist fight, they would have done what I said, where it's, oh, anytime you try to punch Abby down, she will kill you. But if you decide not to fight, then that's the ending. But by giving that choice, that
you know,
makes sense.
and I think, and like like the fans who don't get the point, like they wouldn't care because they'd kill Abby and be like, well, I did
They
it.
got
My
the
work
ending
is
that they
done.
wanted, and it's the non-canon ending. So, suck on
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So I think that would have opened up to more discussion where it's like, what do you think is the true ending? Do you think, because some people would say, oh, like it's all about revenge and it's a tragedy that she ends up killing Abby even after all that, and other people would say, no, it's about forgiveness. I don't know. I just think it would have been a more powerful moment to me if I, as the player, chose, like, because like I went through the process. Me as Alex playing it, I forgave Abby after what she did. And I forgave her before Ellie did, because I forgave her as soon as I cut her down. I'm like, yes, go down the boat and go. I did not want the final fight. The final fight was
I
not
think
fun.
that
I
any
disagreed with
normal,
every stroke.
sensible, empathetic
Yeah,
person would have felt the same
and
way.
I think I just say like from to use the game, like the act of playing the game to make that decision, to me would have been a stronger resolution.
Hmm.
If I as Alex forgave Abby and chose not to fight, rather than mash the square a button to watch Ellie do it.
You know what? That that sounds great. I think that's a really good idea. The way if you phrase it to me that way, that sounds great. I can't say how it will do in focus group testing or
I
with capital G gamers, but whatever.
I but
I don't care
as
about that.
I know, as we already know, it's a can of worms anyway. Because there's a lot of people who
Yeah,
wish they did
they
kill
weren't
Abby.
gonna.
So it's like,
But honestly, most people who pick up the game aren't even gonna get that far.
yeah,
That's
that
the
too.
sad truth. There are so many games out there where like people will pick these things up. Like they're like not to harp on Nier Automata again, but like there are probably people out there that did the first playthrough and just kind of wrote it off as like another 10-hour platinum game. But there's so much more beneath the surface.
I know.
Like
So
genuinely so much like completely different game each time you reload it until you're done. So anyway, I think that that's a good idea. Um, we've spent all this last 20 minutes talking about the ending. Do we
I
want to
know.
talk about any other
So
story
yeah,
stuff
I
though?
feel like we should begin wrapping up because I feel like we're not going to top that discussion.
Yeah,
But is
probably not. That said, I do want to acknowledge that the whole thing because we briefly touched on Lev, who
yeah, it's true.
is
Okay,
a
let's
yeah. Let's acknowledge that. Here's something that the game should have done. Lev is a transsexual character. He
transgender.
sorry transgendered. My mistake. So people had feedback that in the LGBTQ plus community that the that Lev as a character when you're playing as Abby and he's your companion, his uh, old the scars who he
Mhm.
used to be and he defected from, they've disowned him because of his choice. Uh, so and they dead name him, which is calling him by his previous name, which so they shout Lily, right? And it's I believe almost entirely by NPCs. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Did we confirm
yeah.
that? Yeah. So that's potentially triggering for people. So it felt like it could have been optional. It probably
I
didn't
agree.
need to be in the game at all.
So
But
here's
sorry, go ahead.
I like wrote I messaged you about this. I think the first time it happens is warranted, or at least it worked for me, and specifically because it actually went over my head because they say
It
like
did to me too. I didn't
because they
realize it until I
say
read about it.
because they don't just say they don't say the dead name, they say apostate, and I thought that's what Lev was referring to because
Oh,
when he said like,
I see.
oh, like did you hear what they called me, and then Abby says like no, and then it's like, well, do you want to talk about it, and Abby says no, it doesn't matter, and I thought like that was
Because
so
they're dead, we
powerful.
killed them.
But I thought it's like, oh, do you want to talk about like
Yeah.
like what my name is and
Yeah.
why it's not this, and I thought that was so powerful that Abby just said like, I accept you,
Yeah.
and that's all that, and that's
yeah, exactly.
I
And that's
accept you, and that's all that matters, and that the fact that I
that's
realized,
definitely the trade-off.
the fact that, and then I went back and I realized, oh, like Lily, that's what he was referring to, not the apostate part.
Yeah.
And then I thought still that's powerful. That like that's a like I mean, like it's sort of a swing and a miss, and it is triggering, and it's sort of sad that like trans people
Yeah.
still don't get
And
like quality representation. But the fact that it's there at all is still more than a lot of other games. And
yeah.
I think if they just had that one moment and it's just Abby saying, you know what, I accept you.
And in defense
That
of
would have been
people
great.
that would have rather that it not be there, um, it's a trope at this point because
Yeah.
when publishers or filmmakers try to be inclusive and they have a transgendered character, that's always the fallback because it kind of like gets like a reaction.
It raises the
And
stakes. It's emotional, and
yeah, and it's easy,
yeah, it's an
it kind of
easy. Yeah,
it's so I think to their point, it it's critical. It's easy to, or rather, like we should be critical of it because it doesn't really progress all too much. It's stuff that's been seen before, and for people like you and I, it's effective in allowing us to empathize. But for somebody who is already transgendered, it's kind of like, it's don't want to see that, right?
I know.
So
And so
I think allowing it to be disabled in accessibility options
yeah.
would have been a really nice thing, and it would have been super easy because all they have to do is just cut out like 6 lines of dialogue.
And that's what I mean is that, like I said, the first time I think it's fine because it's followed up with Abby saying, I accept you. And
Yes,
I mean,
as a story point, it's great.
to me, the fact that it keeps happening, and it's not even in cutscenes, it's literally random enemy dialogue.
Yeah.
That's how I agree with you. It could have totally been turned off. It totally would. Like, the fact that the game is saying, we accept this person as who he is.
Yes.
And then it's saying, but these people don't. And it's like, we already know they don't. That's why they're trying to attack us. Like,
and it's and even then, it's a major story point with the mother later on anyway.
Exactly. Like, and we get it.
So it's almost kind of like you could have just left it at Abby kind of just accepts him.
I think that would have been way more powerful. So I do love Lev as a character, though. I think he's sort of like...
Oh, yeah. I think everybody agrees that Lev is the most wholesome...
He is. He's the... I mean, Dina also is probably Ellie's as far as like a light in her life.
I don't want to I haven't processed it like 100% yet, but my initial reactions were kind of that I don't know how Dina kind of felt for me, because I felt like that she was a little kind of like, it felt like she was using Ellie a little bit kind of towards the beginning, and then when they kind of get wrapped up in things together, she keeps things from her, and the plot point of Ellie being immune is she uses her own pregnancy to like undermine the whole thing, and she probably should have just stayed. And I don't know, it kind of...
Yeah, she's... I don't know, she's kind of... I really like Dina. At first, I thought she was kind of...
She's charming as heck.
Yeah, I thought she was almost to the point of like, like the phrase, like manic pixie dream girl-esque. Like, because Ellie is so like sort of somber and not edgy, but kinda. And Dina is like a foil to that. And
she's a good foil, and she allows Ellie to kind of bounce her own sense of humor off of it a little bit.
So I really grew to like Dina, and it's nice playing New Game Plus again because I get to have her interactions again before stuff really goes to shit.
Yeah.
So,
but also I think the reason I felt that way is that when you get to that final chapter, like just before when they have the baby and before Tommy shows up, and it felt like, or no, after Tommy shows up, it felt like Dina wasn't really understanding of what Ellie was going through. It felt like it felt like that she was making it about herself a little bit, but maybe I was just reading it wrong.
Well, I mean, I didn't see it as her making it about herself. I felt it was. It's an ultimatum, but she was right. She was telling Ellie, like, you can't keep going down this road. It's only going to end up in you hurting yourself and cutting things off of yourself. In this case, literally her fingers.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, and she's right. Like, she tells Ellie, like, if you do this, like, you lose me. Like, and I didn't think that was her being selfish. I think that was her telling Ellie, like, there are consequences to your actions, and they're going to catch up with you. And like, I shouldn't have to suffer along with you.
Yeah,
I am choosing this life. I'm choosing this farmhouse. I'm choosing this baby. And even though I know how much pain you're going through, I'm choosing you to be the person to spend it with me. And I thought that's beautiful. And like, I really liked Ellie and Dina's relationship. And I thought Dina was like an incredibly strong person, and like they have that sort of back and forth. But Ellie's like, Ellie confronts her. She's like, you don't know what it's like. You're all like this. And Dina's like, you think this is easy? I have my own trauma. My sister got eaten in front of me. Like, I'm just doing what I can.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that's true.
So I really like Dina, and that's why I was frustrated, because I was like Ellie, like, you don't know what you have. You have someone who's literally accepting you and coax you through your panic attacks and gets it and just wants you to be happy. God damn it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, but I guess we've So that's why I think that Dina is the light of Abby's life as much, or her story, as much as I think Lev is the light of Abby's. So,
Hmm.
but anyway,
Uh,
we've been going
I
on
mean,
for over 2 hours.
2 hours. Two
That's what,
hours of talking about The Last of Us 2. I
two
think the
hours,
consensus
part
is that we.
two.
I think the consensus is that it mostly works.
When we went into this, I was expecting a lot of these more to be failures or contradictions, but it looks like we're always like, it's got this issue, but it's still
Yeah,
a success
yeah,
for everything. And that's
yeah.
kind of how
It's weird.
that
I
was
really
ultimately my
want to,
review.
especially because like before you were even writing the review, and like just as I was kind of like about to be finishing it, I was very critical of like its overuse of violence and of like its pacing. But like the more I reflect on it, which is not as much as I thought it was going to be, but when I do,
Hmm.
it is in a very positive way. It is such a stunning game, really good production value, really amazing performances, which we've barely touched on, but it's kind of like
Yeah.
I think the thing left to touch on would be the animators, because they've
Hmm.
done such an incredible job, and I've been of the mindset that they should always be credited uh, alongside, if not more, than performers. Ever since like Andy Serkis started making a scene about like
Right.
his performances in his motion capture suits being more important than anything else, when it's the animators that take that framework and
And then
build
make
the
it actually work.
performance as
Yeah.
artists. And I think that's a really important thing to note, especially like when you have Ashley Johnson playing Ellie through all different ages, from like 14 through 19, and
Yeah.
between different emotional states. And
And Laura Bailey is Abby too. Really nice to
oh
have her.
yeah, I mean Laura Bailey's always been a really great actress in the industry, and I think that as time goes on, I think the conversations reflecting on Abby are going to be much more positive, because it is such a good character.
I'd agree.
And I think that you know what really stuck out to me? I don't remember where I saw or read this. I think it was from Troy Baker, actually, in a podcast that I was listening to, and he was talking about the animators and the expense and the time and the work. So there's a scene early on, in like the 4 years ago, when Joel gives Ellie the guitar,
Hmm.
and he's kind of using like Joel body language, and there's this moment where he takes his thumb and puts it in his belt loop, like as he puts his
Hmm.
hand on his hip. And he said that Neil Druckmann told him that the animators were going absolutely insane for a really long time over animating that shot,
Hmm.
because of the complexity of putting the thumb through the belt loop. Like that was more complex to animate than the majority of entire sequences in the first game.
Oh my god. And that's
So
like I didn't even realize that happened
yeah, right. Unless you're looking, it's kind of, but like
at his
even
hand.
there's moments where like Ellie's with Dina in the movie theater, and you see scars on Ellie's back, and she pulls the T-shirt up over her
Yeah.
head, and the hair. You know how difficult it is for
It's
game
so
animators,
granular.
especially, to not have hair popping up through fabric?
Yeah.
It's like the level of detail. The animators deserve so much credit, and probably more money than they were getting.
Totally.
So, and I know that you briefly touched on that in your review, and if there was only anything else I really wanted to address, that probably was it. So, take care of your animators more,
Yeah.
industry,
Pretty much.
because they do some amazing work. Because at the end of the day, that's the crux of everything. All the stuff that we were talking about and saying doesn't work or does work, those are like office decisions, right?
Yeah.
These animators on the ground level working on these textures, and then these like water rendering engines, and these shadings and these lightings. My god, the lighting.
There's so much going on in this game. Yeah.
Oh, it was immaculate, and 99.5% of the time was flawless.
Hmm.
Like truly, like I can almost barely faintly recall like a moment of something like clipping through like a piece of grass.
Hmm.
It's just it feels so heavily detailed and so lived in that it without that, obviously it's kind of like the whole thing might have
Yeah.
fallen apart because that's. But also the question is, people have been asking, is that even sustainable? And I think it's not. But man, is the artistic integrity of it really, really beautiful, and it's clearly a sticking point on like this is what the PlayStation 4 was
Yes.
capable of, because they clearly want us to just play it and move on and buy a PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
Even though I think that it's going to take a while for PlayStation 5 to really get to the level of being impressive, because I'm looking at the demos of PlayStation 5 and it's just how fast can we load things, how many
Hmm.
particles can we load at the screen, and
Yeah.
this game instead just is so carefully dedicated to making the characters and the world feel like they're just sucking you in and you're just watching something as equally good as the best of like HBO shows.
And I think that's what the first game did too with the PS3. It kind of came out in
Oh
that
yeah,
tail. It came out in the
exactly.
tail end of the console generation and said like, okay, we're gonna bust out all the stuff. That's why I called it like the swan song. It's like
It
this
is.
is it.
Yeah.
This is Sony signing off on this generation. This is all we can do with this frame, with this hardware, with this tech, with these actors, and this time frame before we move on to the next thing. Which I
Yeah.
think is
No
why
doubt.
they pulled out all the stops and why I think it does warrant this much discussion. It's like now that we're leaving this, what is sort of
Oh,
the
and it
watermark.
yeah, and it's gonna be for a while because, well, actually, it's kind of hard to say, I suppose, because in that transition from The Last of Us and the first couple years of the PlayStation 4, it took a while for there to be something that impressive. But now, all of these new consoles are going to be the same as like a PC. It's going to be kind of hard to kind of distinguish like what looks good. And I think that I would like for whatever follow up to this game to focus more on artistic expression in terms of
Mm,
like how things look rather than the granular detail of like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So anyway, do you have any other stuff? That's kind of all I got, really.
No, I just want to say that like again, I was expecting to go into this with us kind of like not tearing it apart, but getting a bit more critical and down on it. And I feel like
Well,
I'm pleasant.
we picked it apart pretty
We
good.
did. No, we still did. We still did. I was just, like I said, the other reason why I wanted this checklist and this framework is to kind of like tally it up at the end. And I was
Uh,
expecting way more like failures or contradictions. And I feel like in the end, we still kind of said that like a lot of this game is a huge success
yeah,
despite all the failures. And I think this conversation is a good um, compliment to the review, and that was sort of my big takeaway, where I was like, I'm still giving it a 9 out of 10 despite everything because it leaves such a huge impression.
yeah,
Yeah, despite all of its flaws, despite all of its stumbles, it still blows you away. And
yeah.
so,
That I think that that is what makes anything artistic or any kind of entertainment work, is like if it can convey those things and make them stick with you despite the clear flaws.
yes,
Um,
that's something special.
yeah, absolutely. That's why like I look at films like does something do like what Spider-Man 1 did, right? Like the Sam Raimi one. It's like clearly so many weird little flaws, but they're so characteristic of the creators. And I think that a game like this does that, like with the creators at hand, with the story they were trying to tell and what their thesis was, as we were kind of talking about. It's like it does everything in its power above and beyond, really.
Hmm.
And I think the only thing that I would want to see different is maybe like a different perspective, like maybe like a different director or different creative lead team
Hmm.
coming up with it, just to kind of see what like a new staff can kind of like bring to the world, I think.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
yeet.
I think
I'm verbally spent.
I yeah, my eyes are kind of going a little funny.
Yeah.
I've been staring specifically, like I said, at the screen of just your face to not look at my own.
To not look at your face.
Yeah. And so my eyes have been hyper focused on like one box of my screen, and I'm just like Abby and Ellie. So I think that's a good.
Well, I was gonna leave it. I was gonna leave it at this, but I think you got me to a point where I might try New Game Plus a little bit.
It's worth it. It's worth
Yeah.
it, especially if you go back and customize the difficulty to just kind of be like a fun experience. It is worth picking up the details again. I'll give it more kudos.
Cool.
So.
Well, all right. I don't really have anybody streaming. I think that I can raid with our 3 viewers, but
Well, thanks for showing up, 3 viewers.
that's okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna end up uploading this to probably my SoundCloud, and I'm gonna do a new feed on Anchor, and I'll send that in.
That's sweet.
The Google
Well, then
Academy
thank you
Discord.
for listening to the podcast, people in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening to us talk about The Last of Us Part 2 for 2.5 hours. So if you want to follow either of us on Twitter, which I think is the social media that we're both the most active on, if at all.
Yeah.
Twitter? Yeah. At fgriff42 for me, and for Alex at the Alex Suffolk.
Very easy.
That's it,
Yep.
right? You
That's
changed it, right?
No, that's it.
Cool beans. All right. So we're going to peace out. Thanks for hanging out, chat. Thanks for hanging out, listeners. And we'll see you later.